Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of viewers aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep these long stories coming. Also, for even more police horror stories, check out my new channel. The link's in the description and pinned comment. I'd love it if you stop by and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. What time is it where you are and which city are you listening from tonight? Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. I've seen that intersection 1,000 times, but that night it felt like the world split open underneath those flickering bulbs. The radio sat silent in my cruiser, its speaker crackling only with the ghost of a hang-up call. No code, no channel check, just the hiss of dead air. I stared out at the rain-slicked asphalt, neon signs blinking farewell, until dispatch cut through the quiet. Unit 14, report to Route 47 for a possible DUI. Pickup truck abandoned on the shoulder. Unknown occupant. In that instant, routine died on the gravel. I punched the blues and reds, tires spitting rocks as I eased onto the wet shoulder. The pickup was there, all right, white, dense across its fender, hazard lights thumping in rhythm with my pulse. Engine cold, door cracked. I flicked off my siren and stepped into the mist. The air felt heavy, as if the fog itself was pressing in to watch. My flashlight cut a narrow beam through the haze, illuminating shards of broken glass and the faint smear of oil on the pavement. Inside the cab, empty. The driver's seat held a single crumpled jacket, soaked through. On the floor lay a half-empty whiskey bottle, cap off, labels peeled back by rain. I swept the beam over the bed of the truck. Empty, except for a scattering of tools. A lug wrench, a pair of gloves stained dark, and a long metal rod I couldn't identify. I clicked the radio mic, voice low. Unit 14 to dispatch, no sign of driver. Possible passenger in distress, requesting cover. No response. Dead air again. I circled the vehicle, my boots sinking into the gravel. The rod lay halfway between the pickup and the tree line, like an offering to whatever might lurk beyond the shadows. I paused, knuckles whitening on my flashlight. Then I heard it, the soft tap of boot heel against pavement. I swung around, heart hammering. At the far end of the shoulder stood a figure, backlit by my cruiser's lights, slumped, drenched, silhouette trembling. "Ma'am?" My voice felt brittle. She wore a dress so thin it clung to her frame, beads of rain dripping from her hair. I took a half step forward, holster brushing my thigh. "Are you okay?" She tilted her head, then straightened, eyes locked on mine, wide, vacant, glistening like wet stones. When she spoke, her voice cracked like old vinyl. "Officer," he said he'd wait. My blood ran cold. "He who?" I swallowed. Her lips parted, but no words came. I shone the light at her feet, footprints leading back along the shoulder, fading into the fog. I checked my radio again, still nothing. "Can you tell me what happened?" She raised a hand and pointed down the road, where the trees pressed in close, branches dripping with mist. "It's under the bridge," she said. "Under the bridge they're waiting." My skin crawled. Under the bridge. There was no bridge for miles, only a culvert beneath the highway. But she wasn't talking about geography. My gut told me this was something else entirely. People lost in the fog sometimes whispered about things they couldn't see, about voices telling them where to go. But this was different. Her eyes weren't pleading, they were warning. I moved to guide her back to the cab, hand extended, voice firm. "Let's get out of the rain. Step this way." She hesitated, then sank to her knees, pressing palms into the gravel as if bracing against some unseen force. Rain sluiced down her face, Her lips barely moved as she muttered, "He knows. He saw you." My heart pounded so loud I thought she'd hear it. "Saw me what?" I asked. She shook her head. "Silent words," she whispered. "He hears silent words." I scanned the edge of the tree line, but saw only darkness. My flashlight flickered, beam narrowing. I hit the side switch. Nothing. The world dimmed into charcoal shades. Then a twig snapped. A figure, tall, lean, emerged from the shadows. His coat hung loose, half-buttoned, collar up, face obscured by darkness. He paused under the lone street lamp, stepping forward until the light cut across his features. Thin lips curved in a faint smile, eyes reflecting mine. "Officer," he said, voice low, calm. "I've been waiting for you." I swallowed wet air, forcing my hand away from the holster. "Sir," I said, trying to stay clipped, my training crystal clear. Always identify, give commands. But nothing in training covered this. I swept my beam over him, no weapon visible, no passenger in his truck. Just that metal rod lying at his feet. He bent slowly, picked it up. Dangling loose in his hand, it looked innocuous, until I saw the jagged edge glint. "Do you mind if I inspect your engine?" he asked, nodding toward the pickup. "I thought you might help." My chest tightened. Everything about him felt rehearsed, like he'd played this scene before. "Sir, step away," I ordered. He laughed, soft and hollow. "Step away?" he repeated. "But I'm just getting started." Dispatch crackled. "Unit 14, are you there?" Static roared. I exhaled, keyed the mic. "On scene. I need..." Crackle swallowed my words. When I lowered the handset, he had taken another step, closer. Rain dripped from his hair. He held the rod out, examining it. "This little thing," he said, tapping it against the palm of his hand. "It can kill. Do you carry?" He tilted his head, curious. "Put it down," I said, voice trembling. "Come on, put it down now." Instead, he rubbed the metal rod's surface as if recalling old memories. "You ever use one of these, officer?" His eyes bored into mine, a twitch in his cheek. He was enjoying this. My shoulder ached, muscles coiled. My free hand hovered over my radio. Backup should be close, but I couldn't hear anything over the pounding in my ears. Then she surfaced again, the woman crawling toward him, gaze locked on the rod. "He said you'd do it for me," she sobbed. He turned, eyes meeting hers, then back to me. "See?" he said, voice soft. "They're all here." He nodded toward the woods. I peered into the darkness, nothing but tree trunk and dripping leaves. But in that moment I felt their presence. The weight of watching eyes, the hush of movement just out of sight. I tried to breathe calmly. Training said slow inhale, clear commands. "Step back," I repeated. The rod gleamed in his fist. "Tell me," he said, "can you hear them?" My chest tightened. I gripped my flashlight tighter, knuckles white. "Hear who?" I whispered, even though I knew. It wasn't voices from radios or radios from dispatch. It was something deeper. Fear itself, speaking in silence. He flicked the rod's tip toward the tree line. "They're hungry," he said. "Haven't fed in a long time." She whimpered behind him. I took a half step back. My foot slipped on the wet ground. Gravel rolled under my boot. My pistol, duty piece, rested snug in its holster, but I could feel its cold weight pressing against my leg. "You don't have to do this," I said, voice raspy. "Put the rod down, let her go." His smile widened, but only on one side. "But I don't want to hurt her," he said. "I want to save her." In the glow of the street lamp, I saw the glint of tears in his eyes, confusion, sorrow, something broken inside him. "Officer," he whispered, stepping forward again. "Will you help me?" My breath caught. Behind me, the fog shifted. I sensed movement, like fabric brushing against bark. I spun, raising my flashlight. Nothing. Turning back, he was closer, rod raised. "Faint heart," he murmured. Then he brought the rod down in a deliberate arc. I fired twice, without thinking. Bright flash, thunder in my ears. The rod clattered to the ground. He staggered, eyes wide, disbelief pooling in them. I dropped to one knee, heart racing, radio finally crackling. "Unit 14, what's your status?" I keyed the mic, voice shaking. "Shots fired, one down." "Behind me," she cried out, stumbling toward his prone form. Sirens wailed in the distance, late but coming. I holstered my weapon, knelt beside him. His breath came in rasping gasps. He stared at me, blood dark on his coat. "Silent words," he rasped. Then he blinked, and his eyes went still. My chest tightened so hard it burned. I heard her scream behind me, thin and high, the soundtrack of dread. I closed my eyes for a moment, heard the rod skitter across the pavement. When I opened them, she was gone. No footprints, no fallen gloves, no whiskey bottle. Just the empty road, the dying man, and me left holding the weight of everything unsaid. I didn't look back when backup arrived. I never looked back. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see that rod and hear the echo of his last words drifting through the fog. Silent words. And I wonder, what was he trying to tell me? I eased back onto the highway before dawn, headlights cutting through mist that felt thicker than the night before. My chest still burned from the adrenaline, every muscle taut from that shot. The cruiser's engine idled with a low rumble, and I steered toward dispatch's next call, another possible DUI, this time a weaving sedan spotted near the old county line. My hands trembled slightly as I keyed the mic. Unit 14 responding. ETA 2 minutes. No answer. The radio was still dead, as if last night's static had claimed it for good. I raked a hand through my hair, wet from sweat and rain, and forced my breathing slow. Training said control your breath. So I counted out a steady inhale and exhale, matching the rhythm of the engine. Lights faded behind me as I accelerated toward the scene. The road stretched out, 2 lanes of asphalt glistening with dew, lined by trees whose branches dripped liquid pearls. Every fiber of me ached to turn around, to head back to the station and pretend none of this had happened. But I didn't. I couldn't. Then I spotted it. A silver sedan drifting across the yellow stripe, headlights blurring like cigarette embers in the fog. I flicked on the cruiser's lights and pulled up behind him, tires rolling over the damp center line. He eased onto the shoulder, wheels crunching gravel. I killed the siren and stepped out, flashlight in one hand, radio mic clipped to my vest. The air was so silent I could hear my boots settle on the ground. "Morning, sir," I called, voice low. The driver's window rolled down with a whine. A man's face swam into view. Late 50s, sharp cheekbones, eyes rimmed red. He wore a stained polo shirt and held the wheel with one hand, the other hovering over a crumpled paper bag on the passenger seat. His gaze flicked to me, unfocused, like someone watching their own reflection in a cracked mirror. "Morning, officer," he slurred. "Sorry, I had a flat tire." He tapped the steering wheel with trembling fingers. Through my spare, though, can't find it. I scanned the bed of the car, no tools, no jack. Just a mess of fast food wrappers, a half-empty water bottle rolling beneath the pedals. "License and registration, please," I said. He fumbled, hand shaking as he reached for his wallet. I saw his driver's license picture. A clean-shaven man, neat hair, unrecognizable compared to this. I waved my flashlight into the back seat. Nothing, except a single suitcase, old leather, slashed at the seams. Inside, I glimpsed rolled-up clothes, a rusted chain, and a faded photograph tucked between pages of a tattered notebook. The face in the photo was indistinct, but the man's hand hovered protectively over it, as if afraid it might slip away. "Sir, step out of the vehicle," I said, voice firmer. He froze, eyes wide. "Why?" he asked, panic threading his words. "I just need to check the bag." "Step out, please." He hesitated, then complied, the driver's door creaking as he swung out. I closed the door behind him and approached the sedan. The night air felt colder now, the fog pressing in again. "Are you under the influence?" I asked. He blinked, head tilting. "Not drinking," he said, "just anxious." He held out his hands. I saw small cuts, dried blood at the knuckles. "I swear, officer, I'm fine." But his eyes darted to the forest edge, as if expecting someone to emerge. I opened the suitcase. Cloth, a small flask, the notebook. The pages were full of entries, scribbled dates, times, phrases like, "He watches," "Under the road," "Don't let him through." My heart pounded. "Explain this," I said, flipping the notebook open. The man's lip trembled. "They said it'd be here," he whispered. "He said he'd take her." "Who?" I demanded. He shook his head. "They're under the road," he said, "beneath the asphalt, waiting." My breath caught. I glanced at the fog-shrouded highway. Nothing. Just trees leaning into darkness. Dispatch finally crackled. "Unit 14, backup ETA 3 minutes. Relief rolled through me, but it was hollow. The man knelt on the gravel, pressing his hand to his ear. "He's whispering," he said. "I can't ignore him." I crouched beside him, training, screaming for calm. "We need to get you off the road," I said. "You're a hazard." He shook his head violently. "No, you're the hazard. You'll let him in." His voice cracked. I glanced at the open door, 6 inches of clearance between the road and his car. "Sir, I'm going to have to arrest you if you don't comply." He stared, bleary and defeated, and then laughed. A bark of a laugh that skidded across the shoulder. He stood and looked at me, eyes too bright in the dim light. "Try it," he said. "Arrest me. See what he does." I swallowed, reached for the handcuffs clipped low on my belt. As I clicked them free, he lunged forward. I stumbled back, flashlight clattering to the ground. The beam rolled, tracing his face, twisted, desperate. He snapped the front of the suitcase into my shins, steel corner biting into boot. I grunted, stumbling, hand going instinctively to my taser. He seized the chain on top of his clothes and swung it like a pendulum. Sparks of panic shot through me. I fired the taser. 2 probes pinged into his chest. He howled and collapsed, convulsing on the gravel. I knelt and yanked the chain from his hand, cuffing him behind his back. His cries echoed under the highway's hollow rumble. The notebook slipped from his lap, pages fluttering open to a final line. "You're next." My blood ran cold. I looked up to see no one else, just the fog drifting, the highway silent. Backup lights glittered through the mist. I stood, breathing hard, staring at the open notebook. As I slid past the cruiser to secure him in the back seat, I felt it again. A subtle shift in the air, as though something had passed between us. I closed the door and locked it, turning back for a final glance at the highway. There, in the beam of my flashlight, I saw tire tracks leading off the shoulder into the trees. Fresh tracks. No vehicle to match, just the imprint of rubber on dirt disappearing into the woods. I keyed the mic. "Unit 14 to dispatch. Possible second vehicle abandoned." Repeat. "Possible second vehicle." Static filled the speaker. I scanned the tree line. Nothing but darkness and those tire tracks. 100 questions pressed my skull. Behind me, the arrestee's ragged breathing slowed into silence. I holstered my weapon, knuckles still white, and stepped toward the cruiser. The woods were still, but I felt watched. I knew I should call off the search until backup arrived, but I couldn't. Something in that man's eyes, in the scrawl of his notebook, whispered to me. So I pocketed the notebook, slid my flashlight onto my belt, and stepped into the fog. Every crack of twig underfoot felt like a shout in the night. My breath fogged in front of me, heartbeat thudding in my ears louder than any radio static. I drew closer to the tracks, skin crawling with each step. Then, just before the trees swallowed the beam of my torch, I saw it. A single, small shoe, child-sized, half buried in the dirt, its laces frayed. I froze. My stomach flipped. That shoe hadn't belonged to the man in the sedan. And there was no logical reason it should be here, beneath the highway's guardrail, alone in the dark. I knelt, heart hammering, and reached out. The shoe's fabric was damp, sticky with mud. Inside, I found a scrap of paper, folded small. Unfolding it, I read the single word scrawled in careful print. Come. I glanced back toward the cruiser. My prisoner banged against the door, dull thuds muffled by metal. Dispatch screamed static again, backup still not responding. The fog thickened, tendrils creeping toward me. My blood froze. There was no way I was letting that shoe go unexplored. And that's when I heard the softest whisper, so low it might have been the wind. Officer, come. My gut turned. My hand hovered over my holster. I knew that I shouldn't move forward, that any second I'd regret this. But I also knew I wouldn't be able to stop myself. The whisper wasn't from any radio, and it sure as hell wasn't from my suspect. I stood, dusted dirt from my knees, and stepped off the road into the tree line, flashlight bobbing. Every breath felt like ice in my lungs. Somewhere ahead, the tracks vanished, swallowed by darkness. And somewhere out there, someone or something was waiting. I punched deeper into the woods, branches slapping my arms, mud sliding under my boots. My flashlight beam danced across twisted trunks, illuminating patches of fog that clung stubbornly to the undergrowth. The prisoners shouting behind me, pounding on the cruiser door, grew faint as the trees swallowed the path. My heartbeat hammered in my ears, matching the rhythm of each step, and I forced myself to slow down, to listen. Tires stopped here, I whispered to the darkness. The tracks vanished at the edge of a shallow ravine, its banks lined with moss and gnarled roots. I leaned over, shining my light down into the gloom. The ground sloped sharply, like someone had gouged a trench beneath the highway. At the bottom, I could just make out scraps of fabric caught on exposed roots, a torn sleeve, what looked like a child's handkerchief. "Sir," I muttered. "Who were you meeting?" No answer, just the distant echo of sirens that still hadn't arrived. I stuffed the notebook into my chest pocket, pages damp against my chest, and checked my radio again, static, blank. Like the forest was actively jamming me, shielding whatever lay beyond. I slipped down the ravine bank on slick earth, sliding a foot at a time until I landed in damp leaf litter. My boots sank into the soft soil, and I knelt beside the fabric. It was faded blue, embroidered with small flowers. I reached out, fingertips brushing the threads, and found the handkerchief looped with a yellowed shoelace. An odd makeshift lanyard. A whisper of movement above made me start. I snapped my light upward. A shape flitted between two birch trunks, half hidden in shadow. I swung the beam, revealing nothing but the gleam of wet bark. "Show yourself," I called, voice louder than I intended. My breath billowed. The shape reappeared, just for a second. A thin arm, pale and silent, then gone again. I rose, flashlight trembling in my grip. The air closed in, each breath tasting of damp leaves and cold earth. I thought of the uniformed face of that young dispatcher, someone who'd never know what I was walking into if I didn't come back. Guilt squeezed my chest, but there was no turning back. The prisoner was locked in the back of the cruiser with the station's only working radio. If backup was dead, it was because something wanted to keep us separated. I followed where the tracks might have continued, brushing aside ferns until I found a narrow game trail leading deeper into the woods. It climbed toward the highway embankment above, but I didn't look back. Every instinct screamed that someone, or something, was watching. Branches twined overhead, blotting out the stars, and the only sound was the soft drip of water off leaves. The game trail ended at a blind curve in the embankment, where roots formed a crude staircase rising to the road's edge. I climbed a few steps, chest tight, and paused where the underbrush gave way to a steep drop-off. Far below, the culvert under the highway yawned like a mouth. I trained my light across the corrugated steel walls. No light within, no movement, just the rhythm of water dripping through the center. I slipped off my shoulder camera, old tech, but maybe it still worked, and clicked it on. No feed, the lens fogged. I swore under my breath and tucked it away, my backup plan gone. I leaned against the embankment, heart thudding, and tried to steady my thoughts. Then I heard it, a faint humming, like metal rubbing against metal. My skin prickled. I swept the flashlight across the culvert slit. There, at the far end, a thin line of light. Not natural, yellowish, pulsing, almost hypnotic. "Hello?" I called. My voice cracked. My hand hovered near my holster, ready. But if it was a trap, pulling my sidearm might trigger something worse. My mind flashed back to the rod in the first crash scene, the chain in the second. Something about these routine calls felt orchestrated, carefully planned. A predator playing with its prey until each officer broke protocol, broke radio contact, broke something fundamental. The humming grew louder, metallic, resonant, echoing in the culvert's steel throat. I crouched at the top, flashlight angled down, and called again. No answer, just the hum, like a tuning fork vibrating with intention. I set my jaw. "I'm coming in," I said, voice low, more to steady myself than to warn whatever lay below. I climbed down the embankment, roots scraping my uniform, until I stood at the culvert's mouth. Water, pooled underfoot, ankle deep. Cold, my boots squelched. I took a step inside. The walls closed in, the beam reflecting off ridges in the metal. Water trickled along the center grate. The hum was louder now, vibrating through my chest. I gripped my flashlight with both hands and edged forward. The light caught something shiny on the floor. A badge, old, tarnished, a name I recognized. 10 years ago, Officer James Holloway. A man who had vanished without a trace after a midnight stop returned empty-handed. Holloway's partner had refused to talk about what happened. The station had closed the case. My breath caught in my throat. I dropped to my knees and grabbed the badge. Water splashed up my sleeve. I checked the engraving. H. James, badge 3492. The metal was cold and slick. I whispered his name. A sudden clatter echoed from further inside. Bad echoes in a space like this. I rose and moved deeper, every step forcing water between my toes. The culvert narrowed where two steel panels overlapped, and the light barely pierced past that point. Then the humming stopped. Dead quiet. My flashlight's beam wavered. A faint voice whispered from the darkness, so close I could have reached out and touched it. "Officer, why'd you come?" My blood ran cold. I spun around but saw only steel walls and the bench of earth behind me. I swallowed. "Who's there?" I demanded. No answer, only my own echo bouncing back. I forced myself forward, heart hammering. The culvert bent twice, turning me away from the world above. Each bend tightened the air, thick and stale. I tapped my flashlight against the wall, sending ripples through the silence. Then I saw it. Scratches on the steel. Parallel grooves, like claws, but too uniform. They ran along the wall, deeper into the darkness, guiding me like a grotesque arrow. My head pounded, and a wave of nausea rose. I knelt, placed my hand beside the grooves, and felt the vibrations. The hum had traveled through these channels. I traced them with my finger until I reached a faint glow at the bend ahead. I stood and pressed forward. My flashlight revealed a small chamber carved into the earth beneath the highway, an alcove, maybe 4 feet across, walls carved by some tool or creature. In the center lay an overturned patrol helmet, its visor cracked. Next to it, the same metal rod I'd seen at the first crash site, its jagged edge dulled by rust. A single boot, Holloway's, peered out from under a pile of leaves. I swallowed hard. My hand shook as I picked up the helmet. It was warm, inexplicably warm, as though it had just been worn. I lifted the visor. Inside, a smear of dried blood and a tuft of light hair. My stomach lurched. Then I heard movement behind me. I spun, light sweeping across the alcove. Nothing. A breath of air brushed past my ear, a whisper. "Help me." It was faint, like radio static twisted into words. My flashlight flickered. The rod at my feet rattled. I swallowed, reaching for my holster before realizing I had no clear target. The shadows shifted. I stepped backward, helmet clutched to my chest. Water rippled around my boots. Behind me, the tunnel mouth had narrowed further, as if the earth itself had moved. I squinted, trying to make out shapes in the gloom. The hum returned, low and insistent, vibrating through the steel and into my bones. "Officer," the whisper came again, closer. It sounded like Holloway, like the prisoner from the car, like every voice I'd heard tonight, layered, overlapping, impossible. I pressed against the wall, flashlight beam dancing across the steel ribs. My chest felt tight enough to crack. I glanced toward the alcove entrance, my only exit. The hum intensified, and the rod slid across the floor toward me, moving as if guided by an unseen hand. I swallowed, vision blurring. My finger trembled on the helmet strap. Dispatch crackled through my earpiece. Static, then a faint voice. "Unit 14, status?" My heart stuttered. I keyed my mic, voice hollow. "I'm detained, need immediate assistance." No answer, only the hum rising to a roar. Walls vibrating, lights flickering. The rod crept closer, jagged edge glinting in my beam. I backed into the alcove, gripping the helmet like a shield. The hum crescendos and the rod stops inches from my boot. Everything freezes, only the low thrum of metal and the distant echo of sirens I can't hear. Then the whisper, "Come." My breath stalled. I took one step backward. Then the steel door of the alcove slammed shut behind me, and I realized there was no turning back. I froze against the cold steel, heart pounding so hard I thought the walls would shake. Darkness pressed in around me, broken only by the faint pulse of my flashlight as its battery sputtered. The hum had risen to a low roar, vibrating through the floor, the iron walls, even the air. My breath echoed in my ears. My hands shook so badly I thought I'd drop the helmet I clutched like a lifeline. I forced a steady exhale. Training drilled into me. Assess, then act. My eyes strained against the void. The alcove's rough earth floor felt slick beneath my boots. With one hand pressed to the wall for balance, I swept the beam across the curved steel barrier that now sealed the entrance. No seams, no rivets, just one smooth sheet of metal. I ran my palm along it. No door, no latch, nothing. Someone had locked me in, and the only way out was forward, deeper into whatever lay beyond. I pressed my back to the wall, trying to feel for any irregularity. The hum pulsed, and I realized it wasn't mechanical. It was something alive, or like a presence. I swallowed, throat dry. The metal rod lay inches from my boot, silent now, waiting. I remembered how it glided toward me like a living thing. If I moved toward it, would it cut me? Would the thing behind it come to life? A soft click echoed somewhere behind me. I spun, flashlight jagging, no change, nothing. My earpiece crackled, static, then a breath of sibilant hiss. I yanked it free. The radio was useless here. I pressed a shoulder to the barrier and shoved. It held firm, unyielding. I let out a frustrated growl. My mind raced. I had no cell service, no backup. I wasn't even sure how long I'd been down here. Time bent in darkness. Slowly, I sank to one knee, helmet still clutched. I tapped its brim against my palm, then lifted the visor and shone the flashlight into it. The plastic was cracked, blood-stained. I slid a gloved finger through the blood smear. Underneath, I thought I saw something. A tiny fingerprint pressed into the grime. Someone had held this helmet after Holloway fell. That someone might still be here. My thoughts spun. Training, procedure, backup. None of it mattered now. This was survival. I stood, determined. There was only one direction, forward. If I waited, the hum would drive me insane. I tapped the rod with the toe of my boot. It clattered, half buried in mud. I knelt and pried it free. The jagged edge glinted in my beam, accusing me. I hefted it like a club, mind screaming that it could be my ticket out or my doom. Then a voice whispered behind me, soft but echoing, "It's easier when you let go." I jolted, shining the light over my shoulder. Nothing. The air smelled of earth and rust. My pulse thundered. My free hand sought my holster, but there was nothing. Only the rod and the helmet. I squared my shoulders and limped forward, water dripping around my ankles. The tunnel ahead sloped downward, the hum fading to a distant lull before surging again. I listened for any clues, the drip of water, the scrape of my boots, the rasp of my own breathing. And then, faint beyond the curve, a voice, male, ragged, officer. I froze. That voice, I knew it, barely. A radio dispatcher who'd vanished years ago. Couldn't be. I drew a breath and called, "Who's there?" My voice cracked. No answer, but the voice came again, closer. "You can't save her." The words twisted around me. It wasn't a whisper now, but a mocking taunt. My knuckles whitened on the rod. I advanced toward the bend. Each step felt heavier. The air thickened, pressing against my chest. I rounded the curve, flashlight scanning. A low concrete ledge ran along the right side, damp moss clinging to it. On the ledge lay a row of badges, 8 in total, tarnished and bloodied. I recognized half of them, Holloway's and badge numbers from precincts across 3 counties. I felt bile rise. How many officers had walked this path? Gone missing? Died? My light settled on the last badge, farthest from me. Mine. Badge 4721, worn smooth by decades of service. I inhaled sharply, my name engraved on one side, the department seal on the other. I inched closer until my beam landed on it. It lay atop a puddle mixed with oily water. I bent, but paused, What if it was a trap? My hand hovered over the rod's grip. Finally, I swallowed and reached for it. My fingers brushed the cold metal. I pulled it free. My breath caught as the hum dipped, then rose again. Clutched in my other hand, the badge felt impossibly heavy. I stared at the engraving. J. Mallory. That was me, years ago, before the academy. But I never lost my badge. It was in my wallet, always. How did it end up here? My head spun. A distant scrape sounded behind me. I whirled, beam sweeping across walls. A dark shape flitted away, disappearing around another bend. My heart lurched. I edged forward until the corridor forked. To the left, the wall bore deep gouges, crusted with old blood. To the right, the tunnel mouth widened, light reflecting off water-drenched steel. The hum came from both directions, now a dissonant duet. I glanced at the rod in my grip and the helmet in my other hand. They felt like weights anchoring me to this place. I bowed my head, whispering into the emptiness. What do you want from me? No answer, only the hum. I stepped toward the wider opening on the right. Water lapped around my calves as I moved into a chamber with a low ceiling, the walls sprayed with something dark and slick. My flashlight's beam revealed carved words in the steel. They never listen. Underneath, scratched in frantic strokes, we tried to tell them. My stomach clenched. Whoever "we" was, they had tried to warn officers before me. I pressed a finger to the phrase. The metal felt strangely warm, as if still alive. A sudden gust of cold air rushed past my ear. My blood froze. Something moved in the darkness ahead, just a shift in shadow, but enough. I raised the rod defensively. Show yourself, I growled. Silence. Then a whisper so close I felt it on my neck. You brought her back. I didn't know who "her" was, but I knew I hadn't. My breath caught. The beam danced across the walls, revealing nothing but the carved message and wet footprints leading deeper. I swallowed down fear and trudged forward. The beam hit a shallow pool, water reflecting a light I didn't carry, blue-white, pulsing like a beacon. I inched closer, peering into the pool. Beneath the surface, something glinted. A single child's shoe, identical to the one I found outside. I knelt and lifted it, water sloshing around my wrists. Inside, petrified fabric clung to something small. A photograph. I flipped it free and let it float on the water. My flashlight trembled, illuminating a black and white image. A little girl, eyes bright with laughter, clutching a teddy bear. I felt a stab of sorrow and dread. Her face was hauntingly familiar, like everyone I'd ever failed to save, or perhaps like the dispatcher who whispered earlier. I shoved the shoe and photo into my pocket, heart hammering. I needed to know what this meant, but before I could move, the badge in my other hand twisted violently, metal scraping against flesh. I gasped and dropped it. It clattered to the floor, spinning until it faced me. Engraving upturned but impossible to read. A voice echoed behind me, louder than the hum. A child's giggle, soft and innocent, rising into a high trill. I spun, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. No child in sight. My pulse thundered. The giggle repeated, closer, almost at my shoulder. Officer, help me. My blood ran cold, the air rippled. My flashlight beam wavered, and in that flicker I saw her, a pale face at the edge of the light, eyes hollow, lips curved in a sad smile. She held out a hand. My breath hitched. She looked no older than 6. Wet hair plastered to her head, dress torn. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. Instead, her lips moved as though mouthing words I could feel but not hear. I lowered the rod, voice shaking. What do you need? She faded at the edges, body dissolving into mist. The giggle pitched into silence, and the hum dropped into a low throb. The badge rattled again, spinning to land engraving up. "You said you'd come." I stumbled back, chest tight, helmet clattering in my hand. The water sloshed at my boots. The tunnel behind me lay in deep shadow, silent. Ahead, the pool's pulsating light beckoned like a heartbeat. The carved words echoed in my mind. They tried to tell them, they never listen. My radio crackled once, a single word. "Mallory?" My name, carried on static. My breath caught. I lifted the rod, knuckles white. Above the pool's light, the tunnel yawned wider, deeper. The hum pulsed again, and I realized it was beckoning me forward. I swallowed, chest tight. The little girl's image swirled in my mind. I swallowed past fear. I stepped toward the pool, water rising above my ankles. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't turn away. And as my boot touched the water's center, I felt it. A tug, gentle but unrelenting, pulling me deeper in. I swallowed hard and let the cold pulse of the water guide me deeper, each step forward an act of defiance against every instinct screaming to flee. The beam of my flashlight bobbed ahead, cutting through the oily blackness as the tunnel sloped downward, water rising to mid-calf. The pulsing light from the shallow pool behind me dimmed into memory, replaced by a faint ethereal glow emanating from cracks in the steel walls, thin fissures leaking luminescence like veins of otherworldly ore. My rod, heavy in my hand, felt like the only tether to reality, but even it vibrated with an energy that hummed through my bones. Around me, the air tightened, as if the tunnel itself pressed in. Each breath tasted of rust and decay, a metallic tang that stung my lungs. My boots sloshed through cold water that churned faintly, as though stirred by some unseen current. The hum had quieted to a low heartbeat, steady, insistent, as though the place itself was alive. I could almost feel it watching. I scanned the walls for more clues, deeper scratches, carved words, something, anything, that explained why this culvert, this accursed artery under the highway, had claimed so many of us. But the walls were bare metal now, slick and unbroken except for the glowing cracks. Here and there, though, I spotted streaks of something, dark and crusted along the floor. Old blood, perhaps, but too dark to be sure. I stepped over them, heart racing, and pressed on. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, triangular in shape, its apex lost in darkness above. The water pooled deeper here, swirling around my knees as I waded in. My flashlight reflected off jagged projections of steel and earth, half-collapsed panels that formed a diaphanous lattice above. Tangles of roots had forced their way through cracks, draping the space in a macabre curtain of wood and metal. The hum pulsed most strongly here, reverberating off every surface. At the far end of the chamber, I saw an archway, brute steel framing a dark passage that dropped even deeper. The glow from the walls brightened there, a sickly yellow that flickered like a dying flame. My heart throbbed as I approached. On the arch's lintel, letters had been hammered into the metal. "Here lies truth." Beneath that, scraped into the earth at the threshold, was a single word: see. My breath caught. Truth. What truth? And see what? I shone my light beneath the arch. The floor angled down steeply, water pouring like a thin waterfall into the depths. I staggered back, boots sliding on algae-slick metal grating. My mind raced. If I went down, I might never come up. But if I didn't, I'd never escape this nightmare. I steadied myself against the archway, dripping water from my uniform soaking me through. The beam of my flashlight traced wet footsteps descending into darkness, inches apart, as if someone had walked here moments before. I swallowed my fear and stepped onto the first rung of a narrow ladder carved into the steel. The rungs were slimy, barely wide enough for my boot, but sturdy. I gripped the sides, rod slung awkwardly at my back, and climbed. Each footfall echoed into the void below. The hum grew louder, bass heavy, vibrating along the ladder. It pressed against my spine, pushing me forward. I glanced down. The depths beyond swallowed my light, an abyss that might lead nowhere, or straight to the heart of whatever had taken Holloway, the dispatcher, the prisoner, and perhaps countless others. My hand tightened on the rod. I felt its jagged edge press into my palm, grounding me. At the bottom, I stepped onto a narrow catwalk. Rusted steel plates bolted to the walls, stretching into an endless circle around a yawning pit. The pit opened at the center, black as a void, water spiraling into it with a muted roar. Above, the lattice of collapsed panels formed a jagged halo, and through a single gap I could glimpse the underside of the highway. Cracked concrete, the occasional glint of rebar, the distant rumble of a truck passing above. It felt impossibly high, like I could fall through and never impact, just keep spiraling into nothing. But what drew me wasn't fear of height. It was the sight of something on the opposite side of the walkway. Dim at first, then unmistakable. A row of bodies, each seated on a rusted bench bolted to the wall. 5 in total, huddled shoulder to shoulder, as though waiting for something. Uniformed forms dark with wet grime, badges visible on their chests, faces turned away. I swallowed and pivoted the beam. Holloway was there, slumped in the middle, head tilted, jaw slack. Black hair plastered to his collar. Next to him, the cellmate from the sedan, chains still wrapped around his wrists, never removed. On the ends, 2 figures I recognized from case files. An undercover detective who'd vanished in a highway ambush last year, and a rookie whose squad car had rolled near here and never been found. My heart thundered. What were they doing here? Alive? Dead? The beam found their eyes, if they had any, just hollows reflecting light like empty sockets. I inched closer, each step sending the catwalk vibrating. My boots left prints in the wet. I crouched before Holloway, flashlight illuminating the side of his face. His skin was pale, too tight over bone, lips bluish. I reached out with the rod, fingertips trembling, and tapped his shoulder. He slumped forward with a wet groan, then jerked upright, head swiveling until he faced me. Holloway's eyes were sunken, pupils dilated, yet filled with a desperate intelligence. He stared at me, mouth opening to form words that I couldn't hear. His lips moved slowly. "They need your..." But the words faded into a gurgle as he collapsed back onto the bench. I caught him, my hand slipping along his sodden uniform. He was lighter than I expected, almost hollow. I stood and scowled down the bench. The detective and rookie's bodies, like mannequins left in storage, had badges and name tags intact. I swept past them until I reached the last chair, a woman's form, uniform dark, a slender build. She turned her head so that I could see her face. It was the dispatcher who'd called in the first broken-down pickup, her eyes wide, tears streaking dried mascara, glance fixed on me with pleading terror. "Officer," she rasped. The word cut through the hum like a blade. She rose, tottering, and reached for me with skeletal fingers. I swallowed. Her uniform was soaked, webbed with mud. On her chest, badge 5583 gleamed in the beam. She whispered, voice so low I had to lean in, "They're under the highway, inside the walls, hungry." Her words rattled through my mind, hungry for silent words. She collapsed then, body sliding from the bench to the catwalk with a wet thud. The badge fell free, clinking. I bent and scooped it up, her badge. One more addition to the collection. Behind me, a soft, scuttling noise made me spin. The pit's edge churned as though something beneath pressed upward, slick tendrils of oil-dark water swirling. A shape emerged, first an arm, then a twisted humanoid silhouette covered in mud and metal fragments. Its head lolled, eyes white, mouth stretched in a silent scream. I stumbled back, heart in my throat. The creature, if that's what it was, climbed onto the catwalk with jerky motions, boots heavy, limbs elongated. It wore a deteriorated uniform, no badge, just tatters. Its eyes fixed on me, vacant, feral, and it moaned. A low, resonant groan that seemed to echo every voice I'd heard since this nightmare began. I raised the rod, arm shaking. The thing advanced, spittle flicking from its lips, each footstep rasping over metal. My mind raced. I could back toward the archway, climb for the light, risk the plunge if the walkway gave way, or stand my ground. But how to fight something born of this place, of every lost officer's fear and failure? The creature lunged. I swung the rod with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with a dull crack against something not quite bone. The creature staggered, breaking into a rasping trill of voices. My partner's voice, Holloway's confession, the dispatcher's whisper, all screaming at once through its gullet. I staggered back, covering my ears. It roared, a sound like bending steel, then pitched forward into the black pit. I rushed the edge, peering down. The creature's body slid into the water, disappearing into the whirlpool. The hum crescendoed, then cut off with a single, ear-splitting silence. My flashlight flickered. In the stillness, only the drip of water remained. The bench lineup stood empty now. I clutched the rod, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. The badges weighed in my pocket, 6 now. My own badge burned against my thigh. I needed to leave, climb out, get back to the world above. I turned toward the ladder, but as I pivoted, I froze. The steel above the doorway into the chamber had shifted. In its place was a hollow frame leading to an impossibly long corridor of glowing fissures. Like the veins of the walls had grown, expanding to form a new passage. And at the entrance, standing in silhouette against the luminescent crack, was a small girl. Hair plastered, dress torn, that same sad smile on her lips. She waved. Her hand was stained with mud and rust. She held out something glinting, a badge, my badge, stamped with my name and number. Her voice echoed, clear in my head but silent in my ears. "Tell them." I forced breath into my lungs. My hand twitched toward her outstretched arm. Every fiber screamed that reaching for it would doom me. Yet I couldn't look away. The whistle of wind, or was it a sigh, swelled behind me. The corridor beckoned. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. The badges in my pocket felt like weights pulling me down. The rod slipped in my grip. The girl's smile widened, and the fissures in the walls pulsed in time with the last beat of my heart. I took a step forward, and everything went black. Water seeped into my ears as I regained consciousness. The world felt heavy, as though gravity had doubled in my chest. I pushed myself up on elbows, coughing out a taste of rust and mud. My flashlight lay some yards away, beam dim. Bad idea to be without light in this place. I inched forward, hands sliding over steel ribs slick with moisture. The small girl's parting words echoed, "Tell them." I shuddered, pressing a palm to my forehead. Above me, a pinprick of daylight glimmered. Maybe the archway I'd entered through. My jaw ached, my uniform clung cold and damp. I dragged myself to my knees, spotting the rod, bent now and streaked with filth. I seized it, dragging my boots through the muck toward the light. Each inch felt like crossing a desert. The edges of the tunnel seemed to contract, walls pulsating in that same hum, now more subdued, almost resigned. A distant rumble reached me, faint but familiar. A truck on the highway. My pulse quickened. I cursed under my breath. No radio, no cell, no guarantee the cab of that truck held someone who could help, but I had to reach the top. I pressed onward, climbing the ladder, joints screaming, until my shoulders broke through the hatch and spilled me onto the embankment. Rain lashed my face, cold and cutting. I gasped for air, half laughing in relief. Behind me, the hatch sealed itself with a metallic click, as if the culvert had devoured a prisoner. I lurched back, coughing, heart pounding. The culvert mouth was empty, still flooded, but silent now. The wind carried the hush of water retreating beneath the road, and for a moment I felt the wrenching isolation that had gripped me underground. I staggered to my cruiser. Headlights off, passenger door ajar. I half expected the prisoner to be cowering in the back, battered and desperate. Instead, the seat was empty, cuffs dangling from the headrest. My own badges lay on the floorboard, 6 in all, arranged in a neat line. Holloway's, the dispatchers, the detectives, the rookies, the cellmates, and mine, tarnished and damp. I swallowed hard, sliding the rod under my arm and scooping up the badges, tucking them into my coat pocket like a grim tally. The cruiser radio burst to life. "Unit 14, are you okay?" The voice was frantic. "Backup, finally, or dispatch maybe." I keyed the mic, voice raw. "Affirmative, situation contained." Lied right through my teeth. I pulled onto the highway shoulder, tires crunching gravel, and killed the engine. My reflection in the rearview mirror stared back, hollow-eyed and soaked. I ran a hand through my hair, dripping sludge onto the seat. "What did you see down there?" The voice crackled. I paused, fingers hovering over the mic. "Everything and nothing," I said. Tell them what?" The radio went silent again, but I knew they were listening. I turned the key, rain pattering on the roof like muted applause, and drove toward the station. Headlights cut twin beams through the mist, but I no longer felt like an officer returning to safety. I felt more like a messenger, carrying secrets no one would believe. As dawn broke over the highway, I thought of the girl, her pale face pressed against the steel fissures, and her demand, "Tell them." I clenched the rod in my lap, the badges heavy in my pocket, and wondered who truly awaited my report, and who would answer if I told. I step out into the rain, boots slipping on wet gravel as the cruiser's headlights slice through the mist. The highway is empty except for the red glow of the sedan's taillights receding into the darkness. My breath puffs in short bursts, mingling with the hiss of water dripping off the brim of my cap. I lithely clamp my flashlight in one hand, holstering my weapon in the other. The routine stop already feeling off-kilter before I even call it in. "Dispatch, Unit 47 to base. Routine traffic stop, location 9 miles north of County Line Bridge. Awaiting license and registration," I say, voice low and calm, hoping the storm won't crack it into shards of static. The sedan's engine has died, but its interior light pulses like a trapped heartbeat. I step closer, rain ricocheting off my uniform, red and blue reflections dancing on the slick pavement. The driver's side window rolls down with a whining reluctance, revealing a woman whose face is drenched in tears and rain, indistinguishable from one another. She holds out her documents without looking up, lips pressed together as though she's tasting something sour. I lean in, flashlight beam jittering across the dashboard. The woman's hands are stained dark at the fingertips. A drop lands on the vinyl, smearing into a shape I can't identify. She opens her mouth to speak, but a crack of thunder swallows her words. I step back, uneasy. "Ma'am?" I say. "Everything all right?" She blinks, and I catch the sheen of fear in her eyes. "He's in the back," she whispers, voice cracking like glass. My pulse spikes. "Who's—" But she shakes her head, mouth pressing into a thin line. I glance over my shoulder at the passenger door, slightly ajar, steam billowing out like breath from a dying animal. My training screams to secure the scene, but instinct tells me to move slowly, keep things calm. I touch my radio again, half expecting the crackle of backup. Nothing but static. I nod. "I'll check the back seat," I say quietly. She steps out, boots splashing in shallow puddles, eyes never leaving mine. She folds her arms, clutching herself as though to hold together what's already fallen apart. I open the rear door. The smell hits me first, sweet, metallic. I train the flashlight across the seat, dark stain spreading like a bruise. No one's there. I run my gloved fingers through the wet upholstery. It coats my glove in slick warmth. No footprints in the raindrops on the doorsill. No smears on the shoulder strap. It's as if someone vanished into thin air, leaving only a stain and a memory. "Sir?" I glance at the driver, reaching for her arm, but she steps back, shaking. Her eyes brim with tears, but there's something else there. Resolve. I couldn't call it in," she stammers. "When I heard it, I couldn't." I swallow, the ache in my chest unfamiliar. "When did you hear it?" The woman's jaw clenches. "A knock," she says. "On my front door. I went out to see who it was. Then he was gone." My grip tightens on the flashlight. "Did you see him?" She shakes her head again, so violently her shoulders shudder. Number I only heard the knock, then footsteps. I ran to the car. I was safe until I looked back. She glances over her shoulder at the side road disappearing into darkness. Gravel crunched. Footsteps. The hair on my neck stands up. I look down at my boots. Water pooling around them, but no footprints leading back to the edge of the pavement. "Ma'am," I say softly, "can you tell me what you heard exactly?" She fights to steady her breathing, each exhale a rasp in the humid night. 3 knocks, like someone tapping on a wooden door, then footsteps, away from the house. Then I saw the blood. My chest tightens. "Blood?" She points at the open passenger door. "He dripped blood onto the mat. I didn't see him, but I saw it." She swallows hard, pressing her lips together until I fear they'll crack. "Please, you have to believe me." I nod, though I'm not sure what I believe anymore. I holster my fist and run the flashlight beam down the length of the sedan. The stain's gone darker in the gloom. I lean in, the beam catching a stray thread of red on the seatbelt buckle. I straighten up, rain pelting the brim of my cap, and look at the woman. Her teeth are clenched, eyelashes speckled with droplets. For a moment, she's not just a frightened driver. She's a survivor, clinging to her last shred of reason. Her knuckles are white where she grips the door frame. "We'll get someone out here," I say, already mentally calculating how long it'll take. Too long. "Hang tight. I'll check your house, then we'll get you somewhere safe." She nods, her chin trembling. She opens her mouth, then closes it, looking past me. I follow her gaze down the highway, where the taillights of my cruiser recede into the darkness. There's nothing there. No second officer, no sergeant's car. Nothing but the looming black of endless road. I step back, heart hammering, and glance at the open rear door again. The beam of my flashlight catches something on the floor mat. A small, smeared fingerprint pressed into the rain-dark vinyl. It looks too small to be a man's. Maybe a child's, or smaller still. I kneel, expecting to find a gloved print, but my fingers brush the smudge and come away coated in damp blood. A gust of wind rattles the sedan, making the rear window shudder. I look up, thinking I hear a whisper, just as the car's radio crackles alive with static. Unit 47, report status, over. I fumble for the mic. My glove skids on the cold metal. The woman stiffens beside me, eyes wide as saucers. I clear my throat. Got something here, I say, voice unsteady. Possible victim in the back seat, no sign of him. House looks empty. Need EMS and homicide now. The radio falls silent again. I glance toward the house. A simple two-story with an overgrown lawn, shadowed windows. The front door hangs ajar. Nothing stirs inside. I stand, heart pounding so loud I'm certain the driver can hear it. I raise my flashlight and gun in one practiced motion, moving toward the door. Rain streams off the porch roof in waterfalls. I step up, flashlight beam dancing across cracked paint. A single step on the wooden porch echoes like a gunshot in the empty night. My radio crackles once more. Unit 47, please respond. Static swallows the rest. I reach for the doorknob. My breath catches. Inside, the floor is pristine. No footprints, no drips of blood. Just dark wood and silent rooms. Then I hear it. A soft thump from upstairs, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. My flashlight flickers. I tighten my grip on the railing and whisper into the empty hallway. If someone's up there, come out with your hands where I can see them. Silence. Then the thump again, closer this time. My heart skitters in my chest as I take the first step up the stairs, the wood groaning beneath me. And in that moment I realize I'm not just investigating a traffic stop gone wrong. I'm the one who walked right into it. I crept up the stairs, each step a protest of old wood groaning under my weight, the beam of my flashlight tracing warped floorboards and peeling wallpaper. The air inside the house was unnaturally still. No hum of electricity, no distant hum of highway noise, just the low rumble of my own blood in my ears. I swung the light left, revealing a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. The thump I heard echoed again, louder now, as though something was being dragged across the floor in the master bedroom at the end of the hall. My heart pounded so hard I could taste it. I paused at the top, gun raised, breath slow but deliberate. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind a partially open door, just a flicker at the edge of my vision. I took 2 careful steps forward, the flashlight catching a blood smear on the wall, smeared as though someone pressed their palms there to steady themselves. Below it, a trail of tiny droplets led toward the bedroom. Each drop was a dark promise of what lay beyond. I swallowed, throat dry. "This is the last warning," I called, voice low but firm. "Come out now, hands up." My words felt hollow, drifting into the silent air, unanswered. I reached the bedroom door and nudged it with my flashlight barrel. It swung inward on its hinges with a slow creak that reverberated through the hallway. I stepped inside. The room was dim, only the narrow beam of my light cutting through shadows. A canopy bed stood against the far wall, sheets tangled and stained. On the nightstand, a picture frame lay face down, the glass cracked. I leaned in, carefully flipped it, and froze. The photo showed the missing driver, smiling, hair pulled back, standing next to a little girl in a yellow raincoat holding a small stuffed bear. The daughter. My blood ran cold. They were mother and child. A slow, dragging sound came from the far corner of the room. I trained my light there and saw the edge of a plastic sheet, wrinkled and damp, sticking out from under a dresser. I approached, every muscle tense. I flung the sheet aside, revealing a shallow crawl space, the opening about waist high. Inside, the floor was slick with something dark. I knelt, braced my elbow on the edge, and peered in. At first, I thought it was water pooling in the hollow beneath the floorboards. Then the beam caught something pale, an arm, thin and glistening with moisture. I recoiled, heart hammering. I shone the light fully into the crawlspace. There, half hidden beneath a thin mat of grime, lay the small body of a child, curled in a fetal position. Her eyes were closed, face peaceful despite the wet hair plastered across her forehead. Her favorite bear snapped in two beside her. I realized with a jolt that this must be the missing girl from the photograph. My radio fell silent in my hand. I swallowed hard, mouth dry, mind racing. How long had she been here? Who put her here, and why? A distant voice came crackling through the static, a voice I was desperate to hear. Unit 47, this is dispatch. Do you copy? Over. Relief and dread collided inside me. Copy dispatch, I replied, my voice trembling more than I cared to admit. Mother's missing, and there's a child. Found her in the crawlspace. She's cold to the touch. I need EMS and homicide here ASAP. I climbed back to my feet, turning to lock the crawlspace. Behind me, the bed's sheets rustled, though no breeze blew through the closed windows. I spun, gun raised, and swept the light across the room. Empty. The drapes hung motionless. I let out a breath I'd been holding. That's when I noticed footprints on the dusty floor. Tiny footprints, like a child's, leading from the crawlspace toward a closet door in the corner. I stepped toward them, boots crunching on the thin layer of debris. I reached the closet and hesitated, hand on the knob. My flashlight's beam caught the scuffed outlines of more tiny prints, then a smear of blood on the inside of the door. Slowly, I pulled it open. The closet was dark, but I shone the light in, illuminating a single raincoat hanging inside, bright yellow, the same one the girl wore in the photograph. The pockets were turned out. Empty. My heart stuttered. A soft click sounded behind me, and I whirled around, gun raised, expecting someone to step out of the shadows. But there was no one there, just the open door, the creaking floor, and that oppressive silence. I took a step back toward the closet, and that's when I saw it, scraped into the wooden floorboards, just outside the closet, a single word carved with blunt force. Wait. My chest tightened so fiercely I thought I'd pass out. Wait. The same word from the car, the same warning. I radioed dispatch again, voice shaking. There's a message here. Car said, wait, now this. Static answered me, then nothing. Suddenly, the overhead light flickered on. Electricity surging through the house for the first time since I arrived. The glare was harsh, illuminating the hallway through the open door behind me. In the hallway, I caught sight of a figure, tall, indistinct, standing just out of arm's reach. I jerked the gun up and fired, but the shot rang hollow, echoing off the walls. The figure vanished as I reloaded, leaving nothing but a cold breeze and the rain's distant patter. I stumbled out of the room, heart pounding, and slammed the bedroom door shut. My flashlight beam shook as I turned back toward the stairs. My radio crackled weakly. Unit 47, please respond. I groped for the mic. I suspect is inside, need immediate backup. I slid down the wall, kneeling, my back to the door, gun trained on the knob. Behind me, soft footsteps, bare on the wooden floor, approached. I flicked my light to the hallway, no one there. Another step, closer. I shifted my aim toward the master bathroom at the end of the hall. The door was cracked ajar, a thin line of darkness. I edged toward it, heart thudding against my ribs. Then, from inside that bathroom, came a child's voice, clear and close. "Officer, why did you leave me behind?" I froze, every muscle rigid. The words echoed in the hallway, but the bathroom door stayed closed and no sign of movement. I swallowed, hand sweating on my grip. "Who's there?" I demanded, voice shaking. Silence. Then the voice again, softer, mournful. "You promised you'd find me." My world tilted. I glanced back at the closet in the bedroom, at the yellow raincoat hanging like a beacon in the dark, the message carved in the floor. Wait. I realized then that this was no simple kidnapping or murder. Something more twisted. Something that knew my every move, my every doubt. I took a step back, pointing the gun at the bathroom door. Rain rattled the windows, lights flickered overhead, and the house groaned as if alive. My radio crackled one last time. "Dispatch to Unit 47. Static. Then, in that pregnant pause before the words died, I heard a soft scraping behind me like claws on wood. I spun, flashlight training on the far wall. There, stuck in the wallpaper, was a small, pale handprint. Just the outline, as though pressed from inside. No child there to own it. Only the dark promise of something waiting in the shadows. Watching, and waiting for me to step closer. I stood frozen on the landing, the beam of my flashlight trembling, the word "wait" carved into my mind. Something was in this house with me, something I couldn't see, and it was calling my name. I edged backward from the closet, breath rushing in my ears, every instinct screaming at me to run. The hallway light flickered one more time and then steadied, casting a sickly yellow glow over the peeling wallpaper and the dark stains that mottled the floorboards. My flashlight trembled in my grasp, the beam slicing a narrow path through the gloom, illuminating the word "wait" scorched into the wood. The echo of that child's voice still lingered in the air. "You promised you'd find me." My heart pounded as I reached up to slam the closet door shut, but my elbow caught on the frame, jostling it open again with a squeal of hinges. The yellow raincoat swung free, its empty sleeves swaying like arms beckoning me deeper into the darkness. I wrenched the door closed at last, fingers slick on the knob. I forced myself to straighten, forcing down the tremor in my legs. The patrol rifle felt heavy across my chest, but the pistol at my side felt foreign in my hand. Its cold metal a reminder I wasn't dressed for a child's game of hide-and-seek. The muted thump of distant rainfall pressed against the windows. I glanced at the hallway mirror, my reflection stared back, cap askew, jacket unzipped, eyes wide and unblinking. I swallowed hard, steeling myself for what came next. My radio crackled again, a lifeline in the suffocating hush. Unit 47, dispatch. ETA 5 minutes, came the reply. 5 minutes, 300 seconds to find evidence, rescue a missing girl, confront whoever was toying with me. If someone was even still here. I pressed a finger to the radio mic. Copy that, securing scene. Proceeding to kitchen, then basement check. I left the bedroom with deliberate slowness, sweeping my light across family photographs perched on the wall, vacation smiles, graduations, birthdays. One frame at floor level showed a red-haired boy clutching his sister, the very girl I'd found in that crawlspace, her lips pursed in mock horror. A tiny voice in my head whispered that neither of them were truly smiling now. The hallway ended at a staircase descending into the kitchen. I climbed down one step, then another, counting each creak as the beam of my flashlight flared across a linoleum floor speckled with grime. The kitchen light hung dead above a long wooden table, scarred by years of meals. Chairs were overturned, and the cupboard doors clattered open, revealing empty shelves. A single wine glass lay shattered among shards of ceramic on the counter. My breath caught, I spotted footprints in the dust. Adult prints leading toward the pantry, then smaller prints trailing behind toward the back door. I followed them, each footfall raising new questions. Where was the mother? Where was the child's captor? And why leave this grotesque breadcrumb trail? I reached the pantry and shone my light inside. The shelves were bare, the walls scuffed and splintered. Then I noticed the floor. A scrawl etched into the wood, this time written in something darker than stain. Help me. A flash of movement down the hallway caught my eye. I pivoted, pistol swinging up, but there was nothing. Only the grimy linoleum and the hollow ache in my chest. I moved toward the back door. The handle turned under my gloved hand, and the door opened onto a narrow mudroom. Rain poured in, drenching the old welcome mat and pooling at my boots. Outside, the yard was overgrown, the grass reaching knee-high in places. The stone pathway leading to the detached garage was slick with moss. I stepped out, cold water running into my socks. Beyond the garage, the distant highway glowed faintly, red taillights moving in a slow crawl. My cruiser was parked off to the side, its lights still spinning, but the offender vehicle was nowhere in sight. Whoever had orchestrated this had vanished again, dissolving into the night like smoke. I holstered my pistol and radioed dispatch. Unit 47. Outside, moving to garage, stand by. No response. Static. I clicked on my flashlight's high beam and headed for the garage door. Its paint was chipped, the hinges rusted. Inside, the engine bay of an old pickup truck sat empty, hood propped open as though someone had performed emergency repairs. Tools lay scattered on the floor, wrenches, screwdrivers, a coil of wire. I knelt to examine them, shining light over each piece. Everything was wet, slick with rain, no fingerprints visible. Then I noticed a smudge on the handle of a wrench, clean, as if placed there for me to find. I ran a gloved finger across it. Warm. A low groan reverberated through the garage's bare rafters. Wood contracting, settling, or perhaps someone shifting. My pulse sped up. I spun, beam sweeping the shadows. Nothing stirred but the echo of water dripping somewhere behind me. I turned back to the tools. A small voice whispered in my mind, "Find me." A memory flashed unbidden. My daughter's birthday 2 years ago, her favorite red toy car. I hadn't heard her speak that way in years. Guilt knotted in my stomach. This message, whoever sent it, knew how to get under my skin. I stepped outside again, rain stinging my cheeks. In the yard, my footprints tracked back toward the house, but I saw another set of prints, smaller, leading around the side to a broken fence gate. I followed them, boots squelching through mud. At the gate, I found a locket in the grass. The girl's locket, engraved with her initials. The chain was snapped. I closed my hand around it, the metal slick and cold against my palm. A crack of thunder rattled the sky. I looked up to see a shape perched on the garage roof. A dark silhouette. Heart in my throat, I raised my weapon and fired a warning shot. The shape shifted and disappeared over the edge. No scream, no thud, just the soft patter of rain on shingles. My adrenaline surged. I radioed again. Suspect sighted on roof. Warning shot fired. Approaching house again. Silence answered me. Strange, none of my calls were getting through. I pounded the mic, but only static met my ears. I sprinted back to the mudroom door, yanked it open, and re-entered the kitchen in one fluid motion. The doorway opened onto the hallway, walls lined with more photographs. Family vacations, graduations, the mother hugging her daughter under fairy lights. One photo was askew, frame broken. I picked it up. The mother's eyes were red-rimmed, smiling through tears. Behind her, the little girl's face looked blank. I dropped it with a clatter. Upstairs, something thumped again, like a door slamming. My boots skipped the bottom stair. I raced upward, flashlight swinging wildly. Hands gripping the banister, I reached the top step, pressing my ear to the wood. The floorboards groaned under the weight of whatever was moving behind closed doors. I forced myself to count. Door on the right, bedroom, door on the left, bathroom. I chose the left. The bathroom door was cracked. I shoved it open with my shoulder. The tiles were cracked, sink faucet dripping. On the mirror, someone had scrawled in lipstick, "Leave now." Below the message, a handprint marred the glass, smudged in places, as if someone had tried to wipe it away. My flashlight beam caught a streak of red in the basin. I stepped closer. A torn piece of paper floated in the sink, edges ragged. I fished it out and unfolded it. A child's scrawl, letters uneven. Daddy said I was bad. He said I'd disappear like the rain. Please, officer, find me. My breath caught. I dropped the note. The door behind me slammed shut. I whirled around, pistol raised, but the bathroom was empty. The note flapped in the pool of water near my feet. I picked it up again, voice trembling. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, behind me, a soft giggle, like a child playing hide-and-seek. I spun, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. The bathtub was empty, the shower curtains still. The only movement was my own reflection in the window, eyes wide, face pale. I lowered my flashlight, heart pounding. A whisper drifted through the closed door. "You'll never leave." I rammed the door open, stumbling into the hallway, and raced down the stairs 2 at a time. The second I hit the kitchen floor, the lights went out. Whole house cast into blackness. My flashlight flickered off too, dying with a pop. I stood frozen in the pitch dark, ears straining to hear the child's voice or the scuff of boots. Rain hammered the windows. Thunder split the sky. My radio lay in my pocket, silent. I drew in a shuddering breath and clicked the flashlight back on. The beam illuminated the kitchen, now flipped over, legs pointed at the ceiling. On the underside, another message. Still waiting. I felt something brush my ankle. I looked down to see a small handprint on my boot, wet and warm. I swallowed hard, raised my flashlight to the ceiling, and whispered to the empty room, "Who the hell are you?" No answer. Only the relentless drip of the faucet. And then, from the hallway, I heard the softest child's voice say, clear as day, "Officer, are you coming?" I forced my trembling breath into deep, measured pulls, chest tight as the suffocating darkness pressed in from every side. The soft drip-drip of the faucet behind me echoed like a countdown. The note on the underside of the table, still waiting, burned itself onto my retinas, and the handprint at my ankle felt all too real, like cold flesh pressing against the fabric of my boot. The child's voice, so eerily clear, had beckoned me, and I knew I had to follow it. Every instinct screamed to retreat to the safety of my cruiser, to wait for backup, but something deeper urged me forward, a promise I had made, a duty I couldn't abandon. I cleared my throat, the sound ragged in the stillness. "Okay," I whispered into the void, voice cracking. "I'm coming." I crossed the kitchen in 5 quick strides, slippers of water slipping beneath my boots. The beam from my flashlight carved a shaky path up the stairs, splintering the blackness into slivers of pale yellow. At the top landing, the wires overhead flickered sporadically, giving me only periodic glimpses of peeling paint and dusty floorboards. I saw the bathroom door ajar, and the message scrawled in lipstick, "Leave now," burned into my memory. I couldn't leave, not now. I turned down the hallway toward the master bedroom where I'd uncovered the crawl space. Each step felt like wading through molasses. The door to that room loomed before me, its paint chipped and warped by time. The distant rumble of thunder vibrated through the walls. I pressed my shoulder against the door and eased it open. Inside, the room looked unchanged, yet completely alien. The canopy bed sagged under the weight of darkness. The photograph of mother and daughter lie face down on the nightstand, face shattered glass. The closet door, where I'd found the yellow raincoat, was closed, its surface bearing the imprint of my earlier confrontation. Now, it seemed to breathe with a life of its own. I conducted a rapid sweep of the room with my flashlight. Nothing moved, no hiss of breath, no scrape of nails. But then I saw footprints again, tiny, bare, leading from the mattress toward the open door of the crawlspace. The light caught a flicker of white, bone, perhaps, or a toy. I stepped closer, and the beam illuminated a single Barbie shoe, its heel snapped, lying in the crawlspace entrance. A cold gust brushed past me. The window behind the bed must have been opened. I lunged across the room and slammed it shut, the glass rattling in its frame. My pulse throbbed in my temples. The wind howled in protest. That howling became a chorus of faint sobbing. I pivoted, flashlight trained back on the crawlspace. The sobbing became clearer. Tiny, broken gasps locked in the low ceiling below. My breath caught. I dropped to my knees, sliding the flashlight beam inside the opening. The floorboards glistened with moisture, and in the farthest corner I saw her, the little girl, curled in the fetal position, wet hair plastered to her face, tears mixing with the grime. Her backpack lay nearby, straps torn. She looked smaller now, more fragile. "Sweetheart," I murmured, voice hushed. "It's okay, I've got you." Her head snapped up. Those huge eyes reflected my flashlight beam, wide with relief and terror. She reached out a trembling hand. I swallowed and crouched at the entrance, careful to keep my footing on the damp wood. "You found me," she whispered. "I knew you would." I swallowed hard, gloved hand extending to grasp hers. She was ice cold, but her fingers closed around mine. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. "We need to get you out of here," I said. "Do you know who did this?" She shook her head, hair falling forward in a curtain. "He watches everything," she said. "He set the traps." I frowned. "Traps?" She whimpered and pointed behind me at a grimy suitcase sitting on the bed. I turned, slowed by the weight of dread settling in my gut. The suitcase was old, canvas faded, corners frayed. Its latch rusted and half open, stuck on a jagged piece of metal. I approached cautiously. Before I could touch it, the door behind me creaked. I dropped to one knee, flashlight and pistol trained at the doorway. Nothing. The hallway was empty, no sign of motion. "What happened to your mom?" I whispered. The girl's bottom lip trembled. She closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat I thought she'd fall back onto the floor. Instead, she took a shaky breath and said, "He got her first." I felt bile rise in my throat, but I swallowed hard. "Okay," I said, voice steady. "We're going to get you out of here, but first, tell me about the traps." Her tiny shoulders shook. "Doors that lock themselves," she said, voice barely audible over the rain. "Footsteps in the walls, music playing when there's no radio in the basement." Her voice trailed off. I took a deep breath. The basement. I'd noticed a door under the staircase, its paint chipped, hinges squeaking occasionally. A drag of a heavy chain kept it shut. I'd focused on the bedridden room, but now I realized the true prison lay below. I nodded. "We'll go to the basement. I promise I won't let him hurt you again." She sniffled, wiping her nose on the back of her sleeve. "I want my mom," she said. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "We'll find her." I stood and held out my hand. Hesitantly, the girl grasped it. Her skin was like porcelain. I realized I didn't know her name. "Hey," I said softly. What's your name?" "Emily," she whispered. "Okay, Emily," I said, voice cracking. "Let's go." I led her across the room, stepping over the Barbie shoe and the suitcase toward the staircase. The girl paused at the closet door, lingering in its shadow. Behind her, I saw something glint in the darkness. A dark shape crouched by the wardrobe, its head cocked, eyes glinting like broken glass. My spine froze. "Emily?" I said, spinning around, gun raised. The figure was gone. The closet yawned empty, darkness pooling at its base. I exhaled slowly, holstering my weapon. Emily squeezed my hand, and we descended the stairs together. The basement door loomed at the bottom of the staircase, the chain rattling as the girl's grip tightened. I knocked once, steeling myself. "Officer," I said, voice firm, "I'm here to bring Emily home. If there's anyone else down here, come out now." Silence. I set the flashlight on high and unclasped the chain, the metal links rattling like bones. Emily stayed close, hand tight around mine. We pushed the door open together. A musty wave of cold air tumbled up the stairs, carrying the scent of damp earth and rusted metal. The narrow basement stretched before me, walls lined with ancient stone, floor scattered with dusty crates and broken furniture. At the far end, a single bare bulb flickered, struggling against the darkness. I took the first cautious step into the basement. Emily trailed behind, eyes wide. My boot slipped on something slick, and I glanced down to see a dark mat of blood, even older than upstairs, almost black. The beam of the flashlight danced across the stains, revealing footprints leading deeper into the gloom. We followed the trail. My radio crackled, then went silent. I cursed under my breath. No signal this far underground. I glanced at Emily. She was pale, lips parted, but brave. Footsteps echoed, not mine, but slow, deliberate. We stopped. The beam of the flashlight wavered as I held it tight. "Emily," I whispered, "stay behind me." She nodded, hand clutching mine. Together, we crept forward, following the footprints. They led to a collapsed workbench piled with abandoned tools, hammers, saws, and a coil of barbed wire. I kicked the debris aside, revealing a trapdoor flush with the floor. Rusty hinges, half buried in muck. My heart hammered. "Emily," I said softly, "this way." She hesitated, looking at the trapdoor and then to me. I knelt and placed my hand on the wire-wrapped handle. It resisted, spine of the wire biting into my glove, but I hauled it up with a grunt. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a narrow ladder descending further into darkness. A sub-basement, I realized, a hidden crawlspace far below. Emily gasped, tiny footsteps stepping back. I turned to her. "It's okay," I said, voice gentle. "I need to check this. I promise I'll bring you back up." Her eyes filled with tears. "Will you find my mom?" she whispered. "I will," I vowed. I climbed down the ladder one rung at a time. The air grew colder, thicker, as if breathing through wool. My flashlight beam wavered across low ceilings, long shadows, and walls slick with condensation. The ladder ended at a dirt floor, uneven and strewn with junk, broken crates, discarded clothing, and old newspapers yellowed with age. I swept the beam along the wall, and there, etched into the stone, another word, "Here." Just one jagged line of letters, as if carved by the same unseen hand that wrote, "Wait and help me." My skin crawled. I forced myself to keep moving, following a narrow tunnel that curved out of sight. Each step kicked up clouds of dust. The distant drip of water echoed ahead, a slow, methodical beat that seemed to mark out my heartbeat. As I rounded the bend, my flashlight caught a figure slumped against the wall. A man, bound and gagged, eyes wide and frantic. His uniform was marred with mud and dried blood, belt stripped of weapons, my partner. I froze. "Lieutenant?" I hissed, approaching carefully. He looked up at me, panic and relief warring in his gaze. I dropped to my knees beside him and tore at the gag. He coughed, voice raw. "Byron, you have to. She's not alone." "Who?" I said, glancing back down the tunnel. He shook his head, breath rasping. "She's waiting, in the dark. He told her he'd come back for her." I touched his shoulder. "I'm getting you out of here." I yanked the bindings free and he pushed himself up. His hand trembled as he took my arm. Behind us, the tunnel was suffused with a wet, shuffling sound, almost like breathing. My flashlight beam skittered across the walls and I saw them. Small handprints, smeared in mud and blood, leading deeper into the darkness. Lieutenant Byron staggered to his feet. "Officer," he rasped, "get Emily and get out. I'll cover you." "No," I said, shaking my head. "We leave together." He closed his eyes, pain and resignation etched on his face. "You can't. We both know that." I hesitated, torn between loyalty and my promise to Emily. Behind the curve of the tunnel, the shuffling grew louder, closer. A small, childlike hum began, a lullaby twisted and off-key. Emily's voice drifted down from above, faint but real. "Officer, I'm scared." I swallowed hard. The decision was made for me. I turned to Lieutenant Byron. "Help me get her out," I said. He shook his head, pained. "He wants me." Before I could protest, a soft, clicking sound echoed off the tunnel walls. The humming swelled into a whispering chant. My flashlight flickered, beam dancing across a low figure emerging from the darkness. A child's silhouette, too small to be Emily, too deliberate to be any actual child. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The whispering stopped. Silence fell. And in that pregnant moment I realized we had nowhere left to go. I looked at Byron, at Emily trapped above in the crawlspace, and at that silent shape blocking our only path forward. I swallowed, voice barely a whisper. "What have you done?" The figure took a slow step closer. Behind it, the tunnel stretched into nothingness. The etched word, "Here," pulsing in its darkness, waiting for my answer. I felt the flashlight's beam shaking violently in my hand as the crouched silhouette took another slow step toward us. The hush in the tunnel pressed into my ears. Even my own breathing sounded like a shout. Lieutenant Byron staggered, pressing one hand against the damp stone wall to keep upright. Emily's small feet pounded above us, echoing through the floorboards as she searched for me. I realized, with a jolt of desperation, that she might still be in that crawlspace if I didn't act fast. I swept the light back to the shape in front of us. It was too small to be Byron or me, its shoulders hunched and head tilted at an impossible angle. Every instinct told me to fire, but I forced my finger off the trigger. Something about it felt wrong. Not human, but not supernatural either. Some twisted reflection of childhood, stripped of its warmth. The whispering chant from moments before had faded into a hollow silence. Then the thing spoke, in a voice that rattled the back of my skull. "Why are you here?" Byron and I exchanged a look, eyes wide. I cleared my throat. "We're taking Emily out. Now, no tricks." It cocked its head, and I thought I heard a faint snicker, like a toy squeaking. The beam picked out its face, pale, too pale, as if it had never known the sun. Its eyes shone wet, urgent, pleading or mocking. It was impossible to tell which. "Emily," I called upward, voice echoing. "Don't move." I squeezed Lieutenant Byron's shoulder. "Go up, get her, I'll handle this." His jaw clenched. "No way, you promised." "Go," I hissed. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then sprinted for the ladder. I turned back to the figure. It took another step, and I realized the floorboards were groaning under its weight. It was moving toward me, each footfall dragging something thin and long, behind it, rasping along the stones. I swallowed hard, pointing my light directly at its chest. "Stop!" I growled. "Right now." It paused. For a moment, I thought it would obey. Then it ducked its head and bolted past me, sprinting deeper into the sub-basement. Adrenaline popped in my veins. I glanced at the ladder. Byron was halfway up, pulling Emily out of the crawlspace entrance. She blinked when she saw me, confusion and relief flooding her eyes. I didn't hesitate. I turned, aimed at the figure's retreating back, and fired a single round. The shot knocked the air from my lungs with its echo. The figure stumbled, glanced backward, then vanished around a bend I couldn't see. Footsteps pounded at the ladder. Byron's head appeared above, then Emily's small face. I gripped her hand and hauled her up the ladder first. She scrambled out, hackles of fear rippling through her. Byron emerged next, shoulders bowed, face pale as death. I climbed last, turning back to watch the trapdoor close behind me. Upstairs in the kitchen, the harsh fluorescent lights hummed back to life as suddenly as they'd died. Scooped Emily into my arms without thinking, her little body going rigid in my grasp. She pressed her face against my chest, tears soaking into my uniform. "He's gone," I whispered, stroking her hair. "He can't get you now." Byron stood at the staircase's bottom, panting. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, voice raw. "I don't know," I said. "But whatever he is, has been here too long. He knows this house like we know our own cruisers." I set Emily down gently. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, one hand still cradling his arm where the bindings had chafed him. "I'm fine," he lied. "Let's just find the mother." I glanced toward the master bedroom door. My head throbbed. Every photograph in the hallway seemed to leer at me now, as though judging my every move. I closed my eyes and took a steadying breath. "We split up," I said. "Byron, you take the upstairs bedroom and closet. I'll search the basement tunnel where that thing ran. Emily, stay with me. You can do it, Byron?" He swallowed. "Yeah." We moved 2 by 2, Emily clinging to my hand, Byron venturing toward the bedroom. The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting a strobe effect on the overturned chairs and ruined wine glass. I raised my pistol, scanning the dark doorway to the basement stairs. A sudden scrape echoed behind me. I whirled. Emily had slipped her hand out of mine and crouched beside the table's overturned legs, staring at the underside. I saw the words carved on the wood, "She loves you." Emily's voice trembled. "He said she loves me too much." My stomach soured. I'd assumed the messages were taunts to me, but they targeted her. This case was no accident or revenge. It was twisted affection. Someone had wanted to keep this girl close, like a pet or toy, safe in the darkness. I scooped her up and set her on the kitchen counter. "Emily," I said gently, "do you remember anything about that man? His voice? His face?" She buried her face in her hands. "He wore a mask," she whispered, "a clown's face." My blood ran cold. A mask. The silhouette I'd seen must have been one of those cheap plastic clown masks. Distorted bug eyes. A grin painted wide with grease paint. This was planned. Ritualistic, even. I glanced at the hall where Byron had disappeared. "Lieutenant!" I called. No answer. I strode toward the stairs, boot heels clacking on linoleum. Emily jumped down from the counter and fell into step beside me. "Please don't leave me," she pleaded. "I won't," I promised, sliding into the hallway. The door to the bedroom stood open, light spilling out. I scanned the floor, no footprints, no clues, just that chilling stillness. I crossed the threshold, gun trained low. The bed lay disheveled, suitcase dumped onto the floor, raincoat gone. I swept the beam across the walls, catching a movement in the closet door's reflection in the mirror. My heart leapt. The mirrored glass was smeared again. Missing, scratched into the surface this time. I tensed. Then I heard Byron's voice from inside the closet. "Help me, please." My pulse spiked. I charged over, yanking the closet door open. Inside, Byron lay crumpled against the back wall, bruised and bloodied, hands shaking as he pressed a cell phone into my hand. The screen was cracked but lit with his mother's contact. He dialed her before collapsing. I crouched beside him. "What happened?" I said, voice urgent. He pointed a trembling finger past me, toward the doorway. "He's in the hallway, masked, watching." I turned slowly, my flashlight beam searched every corner. And then I saw it. A blurred movement. Too quick to be human, vanishing around the staircase corner. I drew in a breath and stepped out into the hallway, heart hammering. Emily clung to my leg, eyes wide. I shone the beam up and down the corridor, nothing but peeling wallpaper and family photos. Then I saw the front door at the far end. Wide open, rain sluicing in, wind rattling the glass. My jaw clenched. The masked figure had a clear path. If it fled now, we'd never catch him. But going out meant leaving the basement exit unguarded, risking Emily and Byron in the dark below. I glanced at Emily, tears glinting on her lashes. She mouthed one word, "Mom." The kitchen door burst open behind me, rain and wind rushing in. I spun, pistol raised, breath caught in my chest. But it wasn't him. It was a woman, stumbling inside, dripping wet, her face streaked with tears and dawn-lit hope. She froze when she saw us, eyes wide with disbelief. I crossed to her, lowering my weapon. "Ma'am?" I said, voice gentle. "It's okay, we found her." She dropped to her knees, wrapping Emily in a desperate embrace. Emily sobbed into her mother's shoulder, and I felt a lump form in my throat. The mother's uniform trembled in the dim light, her own badge pinned crookedly above her heart. My mind reeled. The mother was a fellow officer, returning home after her shift. She'd come back to find her daughter missing, been lured into the trap herself. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pressed Emily tighter. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. I glanced up the hallway corner. The figure must have slipped past us. Now there were 3 lives in jeopardy: mother, daughter, and me. I swallowed hard, gathering my resolve. I turned to Byron, still crumpled in the closet. "Call this in," I said, pressing the phone to his hand. "Tell them where we are." He nodded, voice thin but determined. "On it." I moved toward the front door, cautious. Emily's mother clung to her child, fear stark in her posture. I checked my pistol. Then I heard a faint shuffle, a footstep on the porch roof above. A cold dread rolled through me. The storm's wind howled, and I lifted my flashlight upward, gun at the ready. The gutter rattled. A shadow passed over the window. I exhaled, steadying myself. I needed to protect them, every inch of this house. But I realized, with a jolt, that I had no idea where the figure would strike next. Rain pounded on the porch. Thunder rolled overhead. And somewhere outside, masked and silent, the predator waited for the right moment to step back into his playground, my home, my sanctuary, my prison. I squared my shoulders, voice low and steady. "He's not going anywhere." Behind me, Emily's mother whispered, "Please be safe." I turned back to her, offered a firm nod. Then I faced the open hallway once more, flashlight scanning the darkness for a flicker of white paint. A grin that spelled the end of everything. And I realized the true chase was only just beginning. I kept my flashlight trained on the hallway as I backed out through the front door, careful to keep the threshold between safety and chaos at my back. Rain pelted my shoulders, turning my uniform into a second skin of cold water. Emily's mother clutched her daughter tightly against her chest, coat wrapped around both of them like a fragile shield. Lieutenant Byron hovered by the staircase, phone pressed to his ear, voice trembling as he gave our coordinates and pleaded for immediate backup. The porch light flickered, struggling against the storm. I scanned the darkness beyond the railings, flashlight beams sweeping over sodden shrubs and slanted paving stones. Somewhere out there, masked in a clown's grin, the man who'd turned this house into a maze of terror was slipping through the fringes of my vision. He watched us from every rain-soaked shadow, a predator choreographing our every step. A sudden crash from inside the hallway made me whirl around, pistol out, and aimed at the threshold. The front door swung shut on its own, slamming against the jamb with a force that rattled my teeth. I pressed my shoulder against it, yanking it open again, but the wind outside fought me, pushing it just enough to catch the frame. I shoved it back, heart racing, and stepped in. Inside, the kitchen was a riot of overturned furniture. Footprints smeared in dark, aged blood that arced across the floor like splattered ink. Emily whimpered, pressing her face against her mother's side. I rounded on Byron. "He's in here," I said, voice low. "We move together. No one splits off. Understood?" Byron's eyes flicked to the ceiling, where the bulb flickered erratically, casting jittery shadows that looked like claws. He nodded sharply. "Understood." I took a deep breath, checked my pistol, and led the way through the hallway. Every footstep felt like walking on eggshells. The photos on the walls, once tokens of domestic bliss, now stared down at us in silent accusation. Family portraits twisting in the candlelight of memory. We reached the foot of the staircase and paused. "We go up first, secure the bedrooms," I whispered. "Then sweep the ground floor and garage. Emily and her mom stay here behind us." Emily's mother swallowed hard but nodded, pulling her daughter close. I unlocked the gate that held her in a kitchen chair, and she sank to the floor, cradling Emily protectively. I turned back to Byron. He rose, shoulders squared. "Let's do this." We climbed the stairs in tandem, footsteps measured, pistol beams crisscrossing the walls. The bathroom door stood ajar, the mirror inscription, "Leave now," stark under the staccato light. I checked it first, sweeping every corner, then kicked it closed behind me. Byron watched the door with narrowed eyes, as though expecting it to fling open and drop some horror on us. The master bedroom lay beyond, door hanging off its hinges. The yellow raincoat was gone, the dresser upended, clothes strewn across the floor. I swept my light over the bed. No suitcase, no trace, just the distant echo of that cramped crawlspace. My pulse thrummed, throat tight. "Clear," Byron murmured, but I didn't lower my weapon. Instead, I swept the flashlight across the closet door. The handle rattled. I bolted forward, swinging the door wide. Empty, but on the floor, a single rainbow-colored balloon, half deflated, drifted. I exchanged a look with Byron. This was his calling card. He turned, lips pressed thin. "He's here." A soft giggle echoed behind us, low and sweet, morphing instantly into a haunting chorus of children's whispers. "Let's play. Let's play." I fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The bulb shattered, plunging the room into darkness tinted red by my flashlight. Byron yanked me back toward the hallway. Something scuttled behind the bed, fast, small, deliberate. I didn't wait to see. I sprinted back down the stairs, Byron at my side. The ground floor shook with the thunder of booted feet, as though something massive was running circles around us in the walls. Paint peeled from the plaster, fluttering like wounded flags. We reached the kitchen, where the exits hung open to the storm, and I realized the masked man was both here and nowhere. His traps and messages choreographed every moment, but his body remained a phantom. "Garage?" Byron asked, voice urgent. I nodded. "Rear exit through the mudroom." We dashed across the floor, careful to avoid the worst of the bloodstains, and burst into the mudroom. Rain pounded inside like cannon fire. The broken fence gate awaited, lightning bug-colored sparks skating across the wet ground. I swept my light to the left, the path to the garage, to the right, the front door, still ajar. Emily's muffled sobs drifted through the open doorway. I thought of her there with her mother, trapped, vulnerable. Adrenaline spiked my senses. Byron grabbed my arm. "We split?" I looked at the garage door. Its hinges threatened to give way at any moment, rain dribbling through the cracks. "No," I said, voice unsteady. "We end this together." He nodded stiffly. We charged forward, shoulder to shoulder, and threw open the garage door. Inside, the pickup truck sat awaiting some gruesome reunion or hideaway. Tools lay scattered, but no sign of fresh footprints. The mask's pale grin glinted on the floor mats. Then the door slammed behind us. Nail guns rattled from the walls, glass shards rattling as if the house itself was exhaling. I swung around, pistol raised. Byron was already in motion, scanning the rafters. "Up there!" he shouted. I trained on the ceiling. Between the rafters, a small trapdoor cracked open, and the clown-masked head bobbed into view. Its eyes gleamed. It grasped the edge and began to pull itself through. "Get down!" I yelled, firing twice at the rafter. The shots gouged wood but didn't stop him. He tumbled through, landing on his feet only feet away, chest heaving. He looked at me, mask askew, and laughed. A high-pitched, unhinged bark that froze my blood. Behind him, in the shadowed corner of the garage, Emily's mother and daughter stood silent, pale as statues. Emily clutched her mother's hand but let go when she spotted the masked figure. She took a hesitant step forward. "Uncle!" My pistol barked twice. The masked man jerked, one arm jerked upward, dropping the mask to the floor with a thud. I swallowed hard when I saw the face behind it, familiar, twisted by obsession and sorrow. Lieutenant Bernard's face, carved with lines of sleepless nights and regret. My partner. His eyes brimmed with tears, not of fear, but of a shattered resolve. He looked at his daughter, then at me, and his shoulders slumped like a man who'd finally carried too much. "Why?" I whispered, stepping forward. Every muscle ached, every nerve was on fire. He staggered, edging toward Emily. "I couldn't let her go," he rasped. "Not after she was gone." Emily's eyes welled. "Daddy?" Bernard shook his head, tears carving paths through the grime on his cheeks. "You were everything. His voice broke. I kept my pistol leveled, foot inching toward him. "Then stop this. Let her go." He closed his eyes, taking a shuddering breath. "I tried," he whispered. She wasn't ready." Emily stepped forward now, boots clacking against the wet floor. She reached out a hand. "I'm right here, Daddy." His gaze flicked to his daughter, those same bright, terrified eyes I'd seen in the crawlspace. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Emily ran to him, hugging him, her small voice repeating, "I'm right here, I'm right here." I exhaled with the force of months of tension, lowering my weapon. The storm unleashed in that moment, a wind-driven wave that rattled the garage door. Rain sluiced in, washing over the three of them. I radioed dispatch through the static. "Homicide's here. Suspect in custody. We need medical and a mental health unit. Hostage's father, but he's not." My words trailed as I watched Emily cradle her father's head. The torn locket in my pocket seemed to burn against my thigh. I pulled it out, turning it over. Inside, a faded photo of Bernard and his daughter at her first birthday. Her wide eyes shining, his laughter frozen in time. I looked up at the house, the wrecked hallway, the bedroom closet, the trapdoor to hell below, the messages, "Wait, help me, still waiting, she loves you," all carved into my memory. They weren't signs of some supernatural force, but the raw confession of a shattered soul. I slid the locket closed and slipped it back into my pocket. Emily's mother rose, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. She gave me a look, one of gratitude, exhaustion, and a silent plea for closure. The sirens approached, a choir of salvation. Bernard lay on the floor, body racked with sobs, Emily hugging him as tightly as she had when we found her in the crawlspace. The storm roared overhead, lighting the garage in strobe flashes of blue and red. I holstered my pistol. "It's over," I said, though I knew the truth of what that word meant. Over for now. But as I stepped back into the night, I could still hear the faint echo of a child's chant reverberating in the walls. "Let's play! Let's play!" And I realized, even as the rain washed away the blood and the footprints faded into mud, the real question wasn't whether Bernard would face justice, but whether I or any of us would ever truly escape the darkness we unleashed that night. The rain came down in sheets as I sat in my cruiser, engine idling, under the dull glow of a flickering stoplight. Steam rose from the asphalt, carrying the sharp tang of wet tar and exhaust fumes. My coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but I kept it by my side like a comfort talisman. I watched the droplets race across the windshield, tracing paths that fractured and rejoined in unpredictable patterns, like every call I ever answered. Dispatch chatter hovered in the background, but tonight it was a ghost channel. Half their words lost in static, the rest sounding distant and perfunctory. "Unit 12, you copy?" I whispered, more to myself than the mic. No reply. At precisely 12:03 a.m., a dark SUV drifted over the fog line on County Road 47 and came to a near stop. I flipped on my lights, red and blue splitting across the road like twin warning beacons, and eased the cruiser forward until my bumper was almost touching the rear tire. The engine's hum softened to a low rumble, matching the dull ache in my shoulders that never quite went away. I reached for the mic. "County 47, one driver." No response. The wipers squeaked as I killed the engine and slipped out, boots sinking into wet gravel. I tapped on the driver's window. "Evening," I said. No movement. Rain plastered his dark hair to the scalp. He stared ahead, unmoving, like a statue carved in shock. I knocked harder. "Mind moving that seat back, please?" His eyes flicked to mine, enormous, glassy. Eyes that didn't so much see me as observe some distant horizon. "License and registration," I repeated, voice firm. He let out a breath that rattled his ribs, and I watched the mist swarm from his mouth. He handed me a folded map, edges sopping. No license, no registration. Just the map, creased almost beyond recognition. It showed every twist and turn of these back roads, down to the smallest washouts. "You lost?" I asked, though the map told a different story. Every mile of this county burned into paper. His jaw moved, but no sound came. He shook his head. I stepped around to the trunk. The hatch was closed, latch glinting with tiny rain droplets. I I radioed in, Unit 12, traffic stop, County 47, possible additional occupant. Only static answered. I clicked off the mic. Instinct prickled at the back of my neck. I pressed my flashlight against the edge of the hatch and popped it open. Inside, a child's car seat lay empty, its straps dangling like abandoned ropes. The foam padding was soaked through, and streaks of muddy water formed twisted patterns across the fabric. Gravel crunched behind me. I whirled. The passenger door, which had been shut tight, now stood ajar. My hand brushed my holster, a reflex born of too many nights that went sideways. "Hey," I called. The driver's head snapped my way, eyes wild. He scrambled out of the SUV, knees clattering on gravel, and then froze halfway to me. "Who else was in the car?" I demanded. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just a wet sound like someone trying to swallow fear. I returned to the trunk and shone my light deeper. The car seat was gone. My heart stuttered. In its place sat a single, scuffed rubber boot, toes pointing toward the back of the vehicle. Behind it, the darkness of the woods swallowed everything. No sign of another shoe, no prints leading away. The driver stumbled toward me, hands rising to cover his face, fingers trembling. Rain plastered his shirt to his chest, revealing the outline of a small backpack strapped across his shoulders. I seized his arm. "What are you hiding?" My voice had barked into the night, louder than intended. He sagged into my grip, eyes glassy, and muttered something I couldn't catch. Another crackle over the radio, a dispatcher finally cutting through. "Unit 12, you there? Late check-in." Relief and resentment warred in my chest. "I'm here," I rasped. "Need backup on County 47, possible missing person." "Copy that. ETA 5 minutes. I shifted my attention back to the SUV. The hatch creaked and closed itself, as if guided by invisible hands. I glanced at the driver, whose breathing had slowed to shallow rasps. My flashlight beam danced over the boot again. There was something unnerving in how perfectly it sat. Too deliberate, too staged. I cuffed the driver and guided him to the cruiser. He didn't resist. He only stared at the distance between us, at something I couldn't see. I glanced in the rearview mirror. His reflection looked hollow, drained, as though the weight of whatever he carried had been lifted. I closed the door. Gravel ground under fresh tires. A second cruiser arriving. Headlights washed the scene in harsh white. In their glare, the rubber boot vanished. No reflection under my lights, no sign it had ever been there. I stepped out again, rain plastering my jacket to my skin. We searched the shoulder, fields, tree line, nothing. No car seat, no child, no footprints beyond our own. The driver watched me, eyes tracing every movement. Finally, I uncuffed him. He limped to the cruiser, glanced back once, then slid inside without a word. I climbed back into my own car, swallowed cold coffee, and pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. My breath steamed against the vinyl. Dispatch cleared our channel again. "Unit 12, status?" I paused. "Return to station," I said, voice hollow. As I drove away, the rain eased to a drizzle, but the pavement remained slick. The red and blue lights faded on the horizon, leaving only the stoplight's erratic pulse. My cruiser's tires hummed on the pavement, and I realized I hadn't felt the engine all night. Ahead, the road twisted into darkness, and behind me, the faint echo of gravel crunching, as if someone was still stepping out into the open. I parked under the overhead lights of the station's lot, engine still warm, and sat for a long moment with the headlights aimed at my own reflection in the windshield. My uniform felt damp and heavy. Rainwater pooled at my collar. I killed the engine and unfolded from the driver's seat. every muscle aching from tension that wouldn't release. The station was quiet, fluorescent corridors smelling of bleach and stale coffee. My boots echoed on linoleum as I crossed to the lockers. Inside, I peeled off my wet jacket, unzipped the interior pocket where the map had rested, and found only a small scrap of paper. Nothing like the full map the driver handed me, just a single line of muddy fingerprint smudged across the grain. I dropped it on the bench and pulled out my notebook. The pages were dog-eared at the corners, filled with terse entries. 2,303, SUV stopped. Driver non-responsive. Car seat vanished, single rubber boot. I paused, thumb grazing the ink. Plenty of officers would write that off as a prank. Muddy kid's boot left as a gimmick. But I'd heard the gravel crunch. I'd seen that boot materialize and then disappear. A flicker of movement caught my eye. The night shift sergeant leaning against the wall outside the briefing room, coffee mug in hand, staring at me. He nodded once, lifted his mug in a silent salute. I forced a nod back and stepped into the briefing room, where an empty board bore rows of colored pins marking calls for the night. The tech desk was unattended, but the dispatch screens glowed with low-red emails and shift change schedules. I tapped my badge on the magnetic pad and signed in. "Rough night?" the sergeant asked, eyebrows raised. He didn't wait for an answer. "County 47, you grabbed your paperwork?" I fished out the clip holding the traffic report forms and handed them over. He flipped through quickly. "Missing person?" he pressed, voice low. I shrugged. Maybe, or someone jacking with us, but I heard footsteps and saw that boot. He glanced at the board behind me, his gaze pausing on the blank slot under unidentified incidents. He sighed. "We can file it under strange. Don't waste too much time chasing ghosts." His tone was half joke, half warning. I slid my paperwork back into my pocket. "Understood," I said softly. I left the briefing room with that hollow weight again, heading for the locker to gear up for the rest of the shift. Rain had stopped, but the sky remained a bruised gray. Outside, the lot was empty, except for my cruiser and the tow truck that hauled the SUV away. I watched the taillights fade and wondered if I'd ever see that boot again. At 2:15 a.m., the radio crackled. "Unit 12, malfunctioning signal on radar road. Deputy needs backup." No mention of a suspect, just a box check run down a two-lane that hadn't seen traffic in years. I slid into my cruiser, heart tightening at the thought of more lonely roads. Radar Road was 15 minutes out, if you pressed the accelerator. I punched the lights and siren, then cut them. Didn't need to advertise. The station's red light hovered over the lot as I pulled away. The drive was silent except for the wipers and the steady drip of water off the side mirrors. I punched. Headlights to high beam for stretches, then dipped them into darkness where trees met sky. Fields rolled by, patches of corn tall as the hood, whispering secrets I couldn't hear. I tried to replay the first stop in my mind, what I'd missed, what I might have misread. But the more I thought, the more details slipped away, like that map in my pocket, reduced to one smudge. I reached Radar Road. It curved sharply after a rusted sign that warned loose shoulders in faded paint. My headlights picked out the cracked shoulder, gravel piled against barbed wire fencing. Gravel, unmistakable. I parked, stepped out, and clicked my flashlight on. The beam cut a cone of yellow through the night air. I heard crunching before I saw it, slow, deliberate steps. Behind me, the cruiser's taillights cast two long shadows into the ditch. "Deputy," I called, "you there?" My voice carried across the empty fields. No reply. I checked my watch, 2:23. The deputy's call had been vague. Radar malfunction. Could have been wildlife interference. A rogue kite caught on the radar dome. But as I entered the ditch undergrowth, the beam of my flashlight revealed boot prints in clay mud. Prints that led away from the road into a stand of cottonwoods. Each print was too large for the deputy's boots. They matched the sole pattern of that rubber boot, deep tread mounds pressed into the earth. My blood ran cold. Behind me, the cruiser's engine ticked in the cool-down. I pressed forward, boot prints guiding me deeper. The trees closed in, branches draping like veils. My flashlight caught something hanging from a low limb, a map, torn but unmistakably the same county map, smeared with mud and threaded with rain-streaked tears. A single corner had been folded down, marking the exact bend where I'd first stopped that SUV. Underneath, scribbled in a child's spidery hand, "We're not alone." My breath hitched. A branch cracked somewhere to my left, soft but sharp in the quiet. I swung the flashlight around. Nothing but darkness. No deputy, no animals, only the press of black between trees. My radio crackled. I yanked it from my belt. "Unit 12 to dispatch. Urgent. I need 2 units on Radar Road now." Static answered. Then a crack. "Unit 12? You copy?" The beam of my flashlight landed on the next print. Huge, jagged, leading straight toward me. I stepped back, heartbeat hammering, remembering every name I failed to protect. Every case that went cold because someone walked away with the truth. Boot prints advanced. Silent, as if made by someone wearing the night itself. I clicked off the radio. No backup, no deputy, just me. The mud beneath my boots, and the whisper of wind through leaves that sounded almost like a sigh. I pressed my back against the rough bark of a cottonwood, flashlight trembling in my fist. The boot prints stopped here, at the edge of a small clearing no wider than the cruiser's headlights would reach. Moonlight, weak, pale, filtered through ragged clouds, illuminating the mud-streaked ground in shifting patches. The message on the map scrap burned at the edge of my vision. "We're not alone." It felt less like a warning and more like a reckoning. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to sprint for the cruiser and stomp the accelerator all the way to town. But I had come too far to retreat. Not tonight. I inhaled, tasting wet earth and pine resin, and exhaled through clenched teeth. The forest seemed to inhale with me, branches rattling overhead as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. I clicked the radio again. 3 quick presses, but only static answered. No one was coming. I stepped forward, torch beam grazing the gnarled roots that twisted like sleeping serpents across the path. The prints reappeared, each one perfectly spaced, leading directly toward the center of the clearing. I followed them, heel to toe, until the beam landed on something that didn't belong. A yellow school bus token, half buried in mud. I knelt, pried it out, and turned it over in my fingers. A battered sliver of plastic, stamped with a faded bus number. I'd seen these tokens years ago back when I did community outreach at elementary schools. Now, it felt like a souvenir from some nightmare route. I stuffed the token into my pocket and swept the light around. No bus, no children. Just the slick mud, broken only by footprints that ended here, and a single piece of chalk lying beside a rock. On the surface of the rock was scrawled one word: home. The chalk snapped in half when I touched it, and the white dust puffed into the damp air. I shivered and took another step, boots sinking into the mud, leaving my own prints intertwined with the giant ones before me. My mind flickered to dispatch logs earlier that night, mentions of missing kids, rural families reporting phantom thumps, doors rattling in the wind when there was none. I'd dismiss them as prank calls, as kids playing with cheap walkie-talkies. But this, This was real, and now it was unfolding here, under my own flashlight beam. I slid the map scrap from my jacket pocket again. The crease marked the exact bend on County Road 47 where I'd made that first stop, and now here in the trees. It wasn't just chance, it had been planned. Someone, or something, had been waiting for me. My pulse hammered so loudly I was certain it would betray me. I toggled the beam upward and traced the trunks of surrounding trees. Whenever the cloud shifted, a patch of moonlight would reveal further prints etched into the forest floor, like a ring of sentinels. I took out my phone to snap a photo of the chalk writing, but the display glowed empty. No battery, despite having charged it before shift. The rain earlier must have seeped in. My radio was dead, my phone was dead. My backup flashlight flickered before dying, leaving me with only the beam of my primary torch, which now felt inadequate. I tried to steady it, but my hand shook as if I'd swallowed too much coffee. A sudden crack, distinct, deliberate, echoed from the tree line to my left. I froze. Thought I might have imagined it, one branch snapping under its own weight. But then, another, closer. Something was moving out there, heavy, slow. I swept the light toward the sound, caught a glimpse of a shape slithering behind a tree. For an instant, it looked human, tall, slender, before melding back into darkness. "Show yourself," I barked, voice more confident than I felt. Nothing. Silence pressed in, then the static snap of my radio microphone, as if someone was breathing into it. I dropped it in shock, radio skittering across leaves. I lunged to pick it up, but the beam caught something sliding across the ground. The rubber boot, the mate to the one I'd originally found, inching toward me as if propelled by unseen hands. My throat went dry. I staggered back, tripped over a root, and almost fell. Gravel, faint underfoot, reminded me that the road wasn't far. I spun around, flashlight slicing through shadow, tracking the path back. The prints led the opposite way now, deeper into the black. I realized then that I couldn't see the clearing's exit. The trees had shifted, grown unnatural. My orientation snapped. I didn't know which way led back to the cruiser. Panic bubbled up. I swallowed it down, heart thudding like a war drum. I grabbed the radio again, pressed the call button, and coughed out, "All units, Mayday, radar road, M's getting, I can't." The mic crackled out, swallowed by static. The radio screen was blank. The forest exhaled around me, branches sighed. I raised the flashlight one-handed, scanning for any movement. Now I saw a line of boot prints edging around the perimeter, tracing a circle like a silent sentinel guard. The chalk word home felt less like an invitation and more like a trap closing in. I backed away until I felt the coarse bark against my shoulder. The beam illuminated the trunk. Scratches, gouges, as if claws had carved them in urgency. Above the marks, faint traces of chalk dust, like someone had climbed up here. I followed the dust with my eyes and spotted a narrow swath of sky, a gap in the canopy that offered a fleeting glimpse of the moon. Decision snapped into focus. I would climb. Any chance to get above the tree line and see which direction to run. I hoisted myself onto a low branch, slick with rain, heels sliding until I found a knot. The tree groaned under my weight. I climbed, one branch at a time, until my flashlight beam swung over the canopy. I peered out over treetops coated in moonlight and saw beyond them the straight ribbon of asphalt, my path back to the station. Relief hit like ice, but then I saw it. A series of headlights approaching fast, not from the road but through the tree line itself. 4 lights in perfect formation, moving where no vehicles could go. Their beams cut through the trees as if charged ahead on phantom wheels. I froze on the branch, blood pounding, flashlight clattering to the ground below. The headlights halted just beyond the clearing's edge, illuminating the ring of boot prints in stark white. For one breathless second, I thought perhaps the deputy had arrived with reinforcements, until I noticed there were no vehicles visible on any dispatch units. No sirens, no radio chatter. I swallowed hard, chest tight, and in that heartbeat of silence heard a voice, soft, almost distant, as if carried on the wind, whisper my name. Not through the radio, but right behind me, low and intimate. I spun, climbing higher, breath catching in my throat, leaves brushed against my face, cold and wet. And then, as my flashlight sinked into the underbrush below and the headlights flickered off, I realized I was completely, utterly alone. My fingers dug into the bark. My eyes stung from rain and something else, something I couldn't name. I looked down, saw the path back to the cruiser, and felt the weight of every regret, every case that went cold laid out beneath me like the mud and chalk in that clearing. I made one choice. I climbed down. With my heart drumming, I landed and took a step toward the unseen road. The forest swallowed me in darkness, footsteps echoing as I followed those prints once more. This time, backward, unblinking, toward the only faint promise of safety. The distant hum of my cruiser's engine still alive under the station lights. Behind me, boot prints faded into nothing, as though the forest breathed them away. And somewhere in the hush, I heard the softest whisper of movement, nothing more than a sigh. I moved through the undergrowth on hands and knees at first, the cold earth biting through my uniform pants, then got to my feet as the tree line thinned. Every rustle of leaf or snap of twig had me jabbing my flashlight beam forward, waiting for something to lunge out. But there was only darkness and the soft mechanical hum I'd been chasing, the cruiser's engine. It felt impossibly distant at first, like a memory more than a sound. But the closer I came, the more it solidified into reality. My boots slipped on soggy leaves as I slid down the final bank that led onto the shoulder of the road. Moonlight pooled in puddles, illuminating the ribbon of asphalt that vanished into black both ways. There, parked at the edge, sat my cruiser, lights off, engine ticking over in its own quiet echo. Relief clashed with suspicion. Why hadn't I heard the siren or the echo of backup arriving? No other vehicles were anywhere to be seen. I approached the driver's side door, every nerve screaming that something was wrong. My hand hovered over the handle. When I finally pulled it, the door swung open on its own, though I was alone. I flicked on the interior lights. The driver's seat was empty, the seatbelt unbuckled. The armrest was damp with water, rainwater or something else. I shoved my flashlight further inside and froze. There on the passenger seat lay the other rubber boot, the twin to the ones I'd found scattered through the night. It sat upright, sole down, laces still tied but frayed at the ends. Next to it, a single traffic citation form, filled out entirely in the same childlike scrawl I'd seen on that map. Name, badge number, date, time all written out, then crossed through with heavy lines. Underneath, the word, home again. My stomach turned. I whirled around, scanning the tree line. No footprints led from the seat into the woods. The question was no longer, who put this here, but when? My breath billowed between chattering teeth. I yanked the form free and stuffed it into my pocket, heart hammering. Everything in me screamed to start the engine and drive until the tires shredded on the interstate lines, but I forced myself to search the cruiser anyway. Gloves in the console, flashlight in the door pocket. My radio lay on the dash, mic dangling. I reached for it, clicked the call button. Unit 12, Dispatch, come in. Only static. I pressed again, then pounded on the dash with my fist. My own name echoed through the empty night. I stepped out into the rain-slick shoulder and walked around the front of the cruiser, flashlight bead cutting a swath across the grille. The hood was wet, rain sheets dripping in rivulets. There, a smear of muddy fingerprint across the metal, not my hand, larger, like something pressing from the inside out. I traced it, fingertips grazing the cold surface, and the image of that driver, mouth covered with his shaking hands, flickered through my mind. I tore my eyes from the cruiser and turned back to the woods, expecting to see movement. Instead, all I saw was my own reflection in the wet asphalt, illuminated by the glow of distant station lights. I tested the engine ignition switch. It turned over, rumbled to life. The radio crackled just for a moment with voices. Unit 12-10-4 were en route. Then silence. I sat behind the wheel, door still open, and stared down the road into darkness. Every instinct told me to leave, to drive until my head cleared, until morning sun burned this terror to ash. But the moment I shifted into drive, something flickered in the rearview mirror. A movement on the shoulder, right beside the cruiser's hatch. I killed the motor and the headlights. Darkness pressed in like velvet. The only sound was the radio's soft ticking and my own labored breathing. My flashlight beam swept back to the taillights and caught a figure standing just beyond the range, shoulder height compared to me, hunched, still. I rotated, flicked the beam higher, and saw it. A small hand pressed flat against the glass of the rear window. My skin crawled. I reached instinctively for the door handle but froze. The hand was pale, too pale, and the rest of the figure receded into blackness. My mind raced. Child, phantom, saboteur. All I knew was that it was human-shaped, one hand planting itself like a grotesque flower against the cold glass. I clicked off the flashlight. My chest tightened. For a long moment I sat in the suffocating dark, listening to my pulse drum through my temples. Then I heard it, very softly, from just outside the cruiser's open door. Knock, knock. My arm trembled as I reached for the door. Knee locked, I braced to stand. The knocks came again, heavy and deliberate, echoing through the metal frame. Knock, knock. At that precise moment, the engine roared back to life, headlights flaring, illuminating the road ahead, and showing me nothing but empty asphalt. I slammed the door shut, turning the key, lights blazing, and spun the wheel toward the station. Tires hissed as I peeled away. In the mirror, I saw the cruiser's beam flicker once more over the shoulder, where no one stood, or so it seemed. But the rubber boot lay where it had fallen, half buried in mud on the shoulder, as though someone had dropped it waiting for me to return. As I rocketed down the road, rain slicing across the windshield, I realized I'd left something behind. Not just a boot, but a piece of whatever had been hunting me. And in that sickening awareness, my whole world narrowed to one question that pounded louder than the storm. When will it come back for it? I didn't slow down until the station's floodlights glared through the windshield, washing out the darkness in stark white. I parked crookedly against the pavement's edge, heart pounding so hard I thought it might jar loose. I killed the engine and sat in silence, the radio dead again, the storm's patter outside my door dwindling to a hush. I forced my hand to rise and open the door. The night air was cool, damp, heavy with the smell of pine and something else, something metallic, like the linger of blood or machine oil. I stepped out and slammed the door. Footprints in the mud beside the road told me someone, or something, had followed me back. The prints were too large for my cruiser boots, far larger even than the pair that had haunted those back roads. Deep treads pressed into clay, sliced by the rain into jagged edges. They led not toward the station, but away, into the inky black where the trees leaned down like silent sentinels. Instinct urged me to run inside, slam the heavy doors, and lock down until morning. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and jogged after the prints, boots slipping in mud and scattered pine needles. Every step echoed with the memory of that boot at the cruiser's shoulder, the phantom hand on the glass, the knocks that rattled my bones. I realized then that it wasn't just hunting me. It was toying with me, drawing me into its domain. The prints led to a break in the woods, a narrow path illuminated only by my beam. I followed, heart hammering, mind whirring with every possible explanation. A prank, a vigilante, a terrified child playing with shadows, and every thought felt too small, too rational. The path curved, bringing me to a small clearing I'd never seen before, though the station lot lay directly behind me. In the center stood an old, rusted swing set, half buried in overgrowth, metal chains swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. Beneath the swings, the ground was churned, as though someone had knelt there, clawing at the earth. My light flicked downward. There, half buried in mud and leaves, lay the map from the first stop, stitched together in sections. The county roads, the chalk scrawl, now blackened and torn apart into a crude mosaic. Surrounding it in a circle were the 4 rubber boots I'd found over the previous hours. Each one pointed inward, like a compass arrow aimed at the map's broken heart. In the center, a 5th boot lay, sole down, lace undone. It looked fresh, no mud, no rain, as if placed there only moments ago. Breathing hard, I knelt beside it and reached out. The leather was cold, impossibly cold, as though it had been forged in ice. I pried it up and turned it over. Inside, tucked into the toe cavity, was a child's photograph, edges curled, soaked through, of a small boy grinning into the camera, baseball cap tilted back, eyes blazing with mischief. On the back, scrawled in the same spidery hand, "Thank you for finding me." My vision blurred. The boy's face seemed to shift in the dim light, smiling one moment, then mouth drawn tight in a silent scream the next. I slammed the boot back down, heart pounding so violently it hurt, and dropped to one knee. The map pieces scattered at my feet, but at the center of the circle, the chalk word "home" glowed faintly, as if freshly drawn. A voice drifted from the tree line, soft, distant, familiar. I froze, every nerve alight. It said, "Officer," then paused. "Thank you." The words were gentle, tinged with relief, and yet they cut through me like a blade. I swept my flashlight to the edge of the clearing. No figure, no silhouette. Only the trees standing sentinel, branches scratching at the sky. I snapped off the beam. Darkness enveloped me. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the distant hum of the station lights. For a moment, I thought I saw the photograph drift toward me on a breeze, but there was no breeze. I forced myself to stand, hands shaking, and gathered the map fragments, folding them into my jacket. The boots I left behind. I would come back, with more lights, more guns, and a team. I would uncover every secret this place hid. I stepped back onto the path, turned toward the station, and noticed that the footprints had vanished. Erased as if they'd never been. No sign of the path, no swing set, nothing but undisturbed forest floor. My flashlight flickered on and off as I approached the edge of the woods, and I shook it until it steadied, casting a single beam down the path I'd taken. But at the forest's mouth, where the swing set should have been, stood a small figure, backlit by the station's glare. The silhouette was unmistakably a child, small shoulders, baseball cap, standing stock still, head tilted. I stopped. My hand flew to my holster, shotgun instinct humming through me, but I hesitated before drawing. The figure didn't move. I called out, voice echoing, "Hey kid, you okay?" No answer. The rain had started again, soft taps on my shoulders. I advanced one cautious step. The figure raised an arm and pointed, straight back into the forest. Then the head turned, and in that moment I saw the face, half covered by shadow, one eye missing, the other wide with sorrow. The skin was pale as moonlight, stretched tight over bone. A grin curled at the corner of lips that had no warmth. It whispered, barely audible over my own pulse, "Welcome home." Then it stepped forward, only 3 steps, and vanished into the mist. The rain's rhythm quickened, hissing on the pavement. I stood paralyzed, the photo of the boy burning in my mind, the swamp of unanswered questions closing in around me. I turned back toward the station, every instinct screaming to run inside and lock the door. But as I reached the curb, I spotted something etched into the wet asphalt. A single child-sized footprint, pressed into the road, pointing straight at me. No other prints followed, just that one imprint, clear as night, as if stamped there for me to find. I felt the weight of every unanswered call, every missing person file gathering dust in some forgotten drawer. I realized I had become part of a story that had no end, no neat resolution. And as I stood there, soaked to the bone, the radio sputtered to life with distant cracking voices calling my call sign. I flicked it on, but no one spoke. Just static that hummed and coalesced into a whisper. Home. I didn't turn back to the boots or the woods. Instead, I climbed into my cruiser and sat, breath steadying, eyes locked on that single footprint. The sirens I never heard approached, growing louder until they were right beside me. The door swung open, floodlights dancing across the dash. I looked up to see the boy's grin, bone white in the glare, hovering in the doorway before slipping into the cab beside me. My hand twitched toward the door handle, then the boy's eyes fixed on mine, and he mouthed one word, "Stay." I jerked awake, heart hammering, the cab empty. The door was shut. The station lights rotated overhead, and on the wet asphalt by my tire lay a single rubber boot, lace undone, pointing back toward the forest. I sat there until dawn stained the sky gray, cradling that boot in my lap. I still haven't brought it inside. And every time I close my eyes, I hear the boys whisper in the dark, beckoning me back to that clearing, to the swing set in the mist, to the promise that some things once found can never truly go home. I didn't sleep that night. Dawn lingered just beyond the station's windows, pale light creeping over wet pavement. But inside the locker room, my thoughts were darker than any midnight road. I kept the single rubber boot in an evidence bag on my desk, taped shut, as if containing it would somehow hold back what it represented. I scrawled notes in my log, dates, times, locations, odd details, the map scraps, the playground swing set, the child's photograph, the boot circle. I filed every report under unresolved, suspicious activity, but my gut told me it was more than that. By mid-morning, I had cobbled together 6 missing child bulletins and unsolved runaway cases from the past year, all centered on this county's southern precinct, cases judged unlikely because the kids turned up eventually or simply vanished without leverage. I studied their photos, ages 6 to 10, wide eyes and smiling faces. They looked happy, normal. And then they disappeared. In each file, a line noted last known sighting. Child seen playing near abandoned park at night. Child failed to return home from grandmother's house. Child glanced toward woods, then ran screaming. All places within a 10-mile radius of County Road 47 and Radar Road. I ran my coffee cold and rewrote my report 4 times. Each rephrasing felt inadequate before the pattern, the tapestry of missing year threads. My partner, Sergeant Ramirez, wandered in around 2 p.m., eyebrows raised at the scattered files. "You look like you've aged 10 years, he said, dropping a thermos on my desk. He'd filled it with fresh coffee. I nodded, voice low. "I'm chasing shadows." He peered at the boot in the evidence bag. "What's that?" I sighed. "Part of the case." He unzipped it and turned the boot in his hand, brow furrowing. "Never seen a boot like this in evidence. Doesn't match any make or model in our catalog." I explained the night's events, leaving out the details that sounded too insane. Lights in tree line, phantom hand pressing glass, the token and the chalk word. I stuck to tangible facts. He listened without judgment, only nodding. When I finished, he looked at me with weary eyes. "You're going back out there, aren't you?" Before I could answer, the radio crackled. "All units, be advised. Juvenile runaway reported near Old Mill Road. Last seen heading southbound." I flinched. Old Mill Road curved into the same woods I'd been in. I stared at Ramirez. "I'll take it." He lifted his coffee in a half-mock salute. "Be careful." I geared up, radio, flashlight, backup mag, and headed out. The sky darkened, storm clouds gathered again, but I welcomed the rain. It erased footprints, washed maps, blurred the line between past and present. I reached Old Mill Road in 15 minutes, its broken pavement flanked by pines. The wind gusted, rattling my car's doors. I tapped the mic. "Unit 12 en route to Old Mill Road for runaway." Static answered. No voice returned. I killed the engine, stepped into the gravel, and fed $2 into the parking meter, a shabby kind of welcoming ritual. I scanned the woods with my beam. The trees stood like silent watchers, trunks slick with rain. This time, I didn't follow footprints. I looked for color. Fluorescent snaps on jackets, sneaker soles, anything children wore. I gripped the flashlight, knuckles white. No prints, but beneath the canopy, water pooled in hollows that glinted like broken glass. I waded through knee-high puddles, careful to avoid deep mud that would suck my boots down. A sudden flicker on my wrist. The digital watch Ramirez gave me flashed 1647. He'd always said, "Keep an eye on the time." A runaway usually moves fast, panicked, but this path was too narrow for a quick sprint. Every ounce of me knew I wasn't tracking a child, but something else. Whatever had toyed with me before was here too. The forest opened onto a clearing half the size of a football field, dense grass and wildflowers gone to seed. In its center stood a lone billboard frame, rusted poles, but no sign. The frame's shadow fell like jagged teeth across the ground. My beam caught the lower support, another chunk of chalk, a single word, "Stay." It was small, almost discreet, and half smudged by rain. My pulse raced. "Come on," I muttered. My boots crushed wildflowers as I approached. The frame stood too tall, way above eye level, outlines of old bolts where signage must have been. If kids ever played here, the billboard would have cast a shadow over the clearing. Perfect for hide and seek, then perfect for disappearance. Another flicker. "My radio, Unit 12, you copy?" Finally, Ramirez's voice. Relief flooded me. "I'm at a clearing on Old Mill," I replied. "Report indicates runaway girl, age 9, I don't see her." A pause. "Hold position, back up en route." The channel went silent again. I replaced the mic. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled across the ridge. Rain started, steady at first, then heavy. I knelt, wiped chalk from the board's support, and wrote underneath in my own scrawl, "I'm here." It felt like both a declaration and a dare. I stood, stepped back, and waited for something to respond. A shriek cut through the storm, a raw, human scream. My heart lurched. It came from the trees at the clearing's edge. I raised my flashlight beam, cutting through sheets of rain to where trunks met underbrush. The scream repeated, shorter, closer. I hesitated at the border between open grass and thicket, then stepped in. Branches clawed at my jacket. My flashlight flickered, once, twice, before stabilizing. In the gloom I saw movement, a flash of red fabric, tiny. My pulse spiked, the runaway. "Hey!" I shouted, voice swallowed by rain. I stepped faster. The grass gave way to a muddy track. I ran now, boots slipping, flashlight carving arcs of light. At the thicket's mouth, the beam landed on a small figure crouched beside a fallen log. Relief and dread warred within me. I raised a hand. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The figure turned just enough for me to see a pale cheek, tears mingling with rain. She stood slowly, hips brushing against the log. I recognized the jacket. It was hers. "Miss, are you all right?" I knelt. She hesitated, eyes darting past me into deeper shadows. "I can take you back," I said softly. She shook her head, arms wrapped around her cell. "No," she whispered. "He said I could stay." My blood ran cold. "Who?" I asked, scanning the dark like a radar. She pointed past me. "Him." I flicked the light there, only rain and grass. Then I caught it, a silhouette behind the board's frame, tall, blocky, unnatural posture. I steadied my breathing. "I'm Officer Mitchell," I said. "You need to come with me." The silhouette didn't move, but I felt it, a weight, watching. The girl slipped past me, darting toward the billboard frame. Before I could stop her, she vanished behind it. I called, "Hey!" and ran to the frame, circled around, only empty air, rain falling in silent sheets. My heart pounded with dread. I reached under the frame, expecting ground beneath, felt nothing but thin air and cold wind. Lightning cracked overhead. The billboard's support thumped, a hollow sound. I circled faster, my flashlight beam darting across the poles. That's when I saw the third boot, perched on the horizontal crossbeam, sole pointed outward, threads frayed. How had it gotten there? No way someone carried that weight up there unseen. I swore, kicked at the mud, and called dispatch. "I need air support and visual on Old Mill Clearing, now." No answer. Static. I unclipped my backup mag, chest tight, and peered through the rain at the crossbeam. On the boot's sole, chalk letters spelled a name. Emily. The scream came again. Soft, distant, then right beside me. I whipped around. The girl, her eyes entirely black, her mouth wide in a silent roar. She lifted one arm and pointed at me, then at the boot on the beam. I froze. The wind died. No thunder, no rain, only the silence of expectation. She whispered, voice echoing through the clearing, "You never stay." Then she was gone. Not running away, but vanished. No movement, no trace, as if the world swallowed her whole. The wind picked up again, tossing the grass. I stared at the empty clearing, tears mingling with rain on my cheeks. The shadowed figure by the billboard was gone too. I fell to my knees, chest heaving. The radio crackled one last time. "Unit 12, status." I gathered myself. "Nothing. No one here." I let it hang. I rose, shaking, flashlight beam cutting jagged paths through the downpour. I climbed back into my cruiser, the final rivulets of rain dripping from my hair. As I pulled out of the gravel, my eyes caught a scrap of chalk stuck to the windshield, scrawled faintly by the wipers in their sweep. "Don't go home." I jammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, mud splattering. I reached out and traced the letters, barely legible through the rain. "Don't go home." My blood ran cold. I glanced at the road behind me. No footprints, no kids, just the mist rising from the broken pavement. My radio sputtered to life with urgent voices asking my ETA. I threw the cruiser into gear and peeled away, tires hissing. I drove straight through until I hit the interstate, where headlights soared and roar drowned my thoughts. I kept going until the rain stopped and the road straightened into endless highway. Now, back at home, if you can call it that, I sit with my door locked, eyes on the darkened forest beyond my yard. Detective chatter says it's just stress, PTSD, and a runaway with a vivid imagination. But I know better. I know those children, those boots, those messages are real. I know the forest is watching, waiting, and that the boy's whisper, "Stay," wasn't a request but a promise. I've moved every piece of evidence back to the station. Boots, map scraps, photograph, chalk remnants, chained them behind sealed doors. But the messages won't stop, etched on walls, on windows, on my mind. Every midnight I hear the tap, tap of small footsteps at my back door. I stare out at the tree line where County Road 47 and Radar Road converge in mist. There's a vacant swing set in my backyard now, bought on a whim, and no matter how many times I take it down, it reappears by morning, chains creaking in the wind. Last night I woke to a soft glow from the swing set. Someone had chalked on the tarnished metal frame, "Welcome home, officer." I don't know who found who first, them or me. But there's one thing I've learned. Even an officer with a veteran's resolve can get lost. And now I'm no longer behind the wheel of that cruiser. I'm inside my house, watching the forest edge, wondering if I should ever leave. Because out there in the darkness, someone, or something, is waiting with open arms, rubber boots, and a promise that I finally understand. Home isn't a place you go to. It's a place you can never leave.